before we get started, your team.
Lack of legitimacy of the appointment, that needs to be dealt with first.
Thoughts, Bill?
We have time to respond.
Sorry?
We have 10 days to respond.
10 days. Oh, do you, I was gonna be like, have us.
I know, I just don't want to have.
Yeah. Because you would be. A water bottle. Oh.
Madam Chair, to not respond to the issue that questions the legitimacy with a formal legal argument is corruption.
We have 10 days to respond.
Yeah, but you have to respond before you make the appointment because it would necessitate a different course of action.
Yeah, we don't believe in this. So I'm going to say that's your opinion.
But you're not a lawyer either.
We got to leave. Oh, it's your shares.
You're making a mockery out of this democratic process.
So we're going to do this, and we want to do those photos about masks.
Required in the building.
I know, I'm not accepting the photos, so it's up to you. I really don't care. I'm just.
It's okay. Should we close the meeting now?
Yeah, let's look at it.
Sure.
Yes.
No, I-
Vermont doesn't trust you enough.
Solemnly swear or affirm.
So Vermont will not directly or indirectly act or solemnly swear or affirm that you will faithfully execute the office of the city council member for the city of Montpelier and that you are justice to all persons to the best of your judgment. According to law, so help you God. Smart. Now the book is just a sort of. All right.
Yes.
You're trashing this down, man.
It is, I just- it is.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah, I just sent the link to him.
Oh, you sent it to him. I'm not wrong.
We've got a hard copy downstairs if you want it.
So you would not have responded and ratified your proposal.
I just saw you reading it.
It's totally corrupt.
We knew it wasn't until the question.
That's your
We weren't sure if it had to be a warned public hearing
Sure, I did.
or not. And, so we're just able to kind of push it on.
And again, it's not my appointment, so I love how you always love blaming me for things that.
Went through, there's only four.
Because you're the public
Yeah, I just saw.
I'm the puppet master. Good job.
I'm excited.
That was a lot of work.
It's looking up every 5 years.
Every year.
Hey,
Team, hey.
how's it going?
Great. That seat's covered.
Jen is here, Jennifer's there.
You can pick anywhere you want.
There's.
So you pull up a chair, make up some spots.
There's one there. Here's Donna.
I feel like I had more chairs than this because I counted. I feel really crazy right now.
There's one.
We might have a worse.
We can fit. Donna, there's one here as well. We can also probably here. There's one next to Jack, and we could probably also.
And they're saying I can probably put another one over there too.
Whatever works.
Okay.
As much distance as I can.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
Over there? Okay, great. All right, well, I think we should get started then. Welcome, Jennifer. So glad to have you.
So I'm gonna call this meeting to order. First thing is to review and approve the agenda, and I don't think there are any changes that please have to the agenda, right? Okay, so on to general business and appearances. It's an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on a topic that is not otherwise on our agenda. We have only really one other item, which is our strategic planning workshop. So we're gonna break this up into a couple of parts. If you have a comment that is not pertaining to the strategic plan, now would be the time to do that. If you have a comment that is pertaining to the strategic plan, we're gonna have members of the public have an opportunity to comment just at the very beginning about that process or content of the strategic plan. And then after that, we will go into our workshop, and that we will not have an opportunity after that during this meeting for further comment from the public, though there will be more opportunities in the future for the public to comment on the strategic plan. So I realize that was kind of a lot of information, but for now, general business appearances, if you have any comments, if you'd say your name, where you live, and try to keep your comments to 2 minutes. Great, thank you.
Is there any fans in this room? No. I'll turn that one off.
Is that where, that's the work?
Yeah, the microphone is on.
Stephen Whitaker from Montpelier. I believe you're doing a really disservice to faith and trust in government by, when there's a pending notice of open meeting violation, challenging the legitimacy of the appointment that was made at last Wednesday's meeting. That, in effect, should be discussed and debated and responded to prior to swearing in and beginning council business. Because in effect, you're sweeping aside a serious issue where a person who was not present and apparently not even informed of the need to be present at the meeting where the appointments were made, and other candidates who were present were disregarded and were not notified prior to executive session that you would be contacting other candidates from within executive session. They were not noticed as being a necessary participant in the executive session, such as an engineer or an attorney or a staff person. So in effect, you have corrupted the process. And then to take the second step of not responding to the open meeting law violation prior to, true, you could have gone ahead and ratified that decision and continued to appoint the same candidate, but you didn't do that. You actually just ducked and barreled through, which is really corrupt, Madam Mayor. You really need to look at the damage you're doing to this town and to faith and trust in government. The transparency and due process. Other candidates were not notified. At least one other candidate was not notified of the opportunity to be heard at that meeting. And yet you made your decision either prior to the meeting and the whole thing was a farce, a preordained conclusion, or you notified the one candidate you wanted and made the appointment subsequent. But either way, you've damaged the public's trust in this process. I have other topics, but this one's needed to be said on behalf of others and citizens. There's a lot of talk around town about how bad this was, and y'all decide to just sweep it under the rug like you've done the shooting of Mark Johnson and many other things.
Thank you.
Procedurally, Stephen, would you please put your mask up so it's functioning? Thank you.
Anyone online or present wish to add anything? Okay. And so we, just as a heads up, we will respond within the requisite 10 days, and we will go from there. Okay. So from there, okay, so we are, so on to the strategic planning workshop. Any public comments specifically pertaining to the strategic plan? Yeah.
Would you like to be introduced to our new?
Oh, yes, yeah, sure.
We're gonna do an introduction piece too as part of the process tonight.
Okay, it's just, okay, fine.
Is that
That's
all right?
fine. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Then, okay, great. All right, so any comments about the strategic plan? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mentioned at the 2 meetings ago that over recent years, I have brought a growing list of issues related to public safety, trash in the rivers, shopping carts in the rivers, feces in our alleyways and our churchyards along the riverbank. And none of those have apparently been collected anywhere into a list, which you could then categorize into the 4 categories in this strategic planning meeting. They all seem to just get lost in the noise of this dysfunctional administration. So I would ask that you direct staff to pull out all those comments from myself and others about the problems that have grown over decades in this town that have been ignored, and take this opportunity to fit them into the strategic plan.
Thank you. Anyone else? Or online? Okay. All right, so with that, we are gonna go into our strategic planning workshop time. And for this, I'm turning it over to Cameron.
Bill is gonna actually kick us off tonight. Got a really great presentation. I do get paid to say that. Thank you very much. There you go.
Okay, so I just click.
Yep.
I'll try to get through this quickly. We thought it was a good chance to go through what the process is, a little bit of our roles. We have a new council member, so it seemed like a good time. We didn't do a retreat or anything this year to kind of go through some of the broad overview. So I'm going to hit the broad overview. Cameron will then go through the specific process for tonight. So I just said that. So that's our agenda for tonight. Why do we do this? Who does what roles? What's the product? And then the workshopping and those kinds of things. So we start here. This is the Athenian Oath. And I wanted to share this. This is the oath that ancient residents of Athens took when they became of age. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the last sentence is, thus in all these ways we will transmit this city not less, but greater and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us. And I think that's really our mission as elected officials and public officials, and kind of the basis of all that we do. So we'll get some inspiration from way back. So why strategic planning? Anybody know what this? Anyone seen this box before? Hands? What is it?
Oh, it's like, what is it?
Yeah, where have you seen that before?
Oh, just other like planning strategy.
So this is
This last year.
This is from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks about your work, and your work tends to fall into 4 quadrants. You know, you're urgent and important, you got to do. Urgent, not urgent, but important, so you need to plan. Urgent, but not important, delegate, and not urgent, not important, eliminate. So to plan your time to do your thing. So as an elected body, we need to use our time wisely. You know, I looked at the number of meetings we have and everything. So we have about 125 hours in a year that you all meet in session, which is how you do your work. So that's roughly 3 work weeks a year. So all that you're trying to take on and do as a group, the time you spend is about 3 weeks. So obviously, we would like to have you focused on the stuff that you have to do because you got to vote to approve something, and looking forward to the future and having the urgent, I mean, not that what we do isn't important, but having the work done by others. So it's how do you focus your time on important leadership issues and really think about your role as council, and then to provide clarity. This is why we do, you know, the more clear that you can be to your staff, the better we can respond. So, you know, as you know, sometimes someone will say, do we need a motion? Like, yes, a motion would be great, because then we have clarity. So this is an iceberg. Anyone have any guesses why I put an iceberg up here?
There's a little that shows and a lot that happens.
Right, so a lot of what the council talks about is up here in the public, and a lot of what goes on, for city government is down here. So it's a good visual, and we're gonna get back to this. Whoops. We're not moving.
I know, I'm sorry, hold on a second.
We've got an online issue.
Yeah, we're having
It's
a,
stuck on the first
we're
page.
having a moment.
Oh. Let's just take in the iceberg. Become one with
That's
its.
not working.
As long as we're not the Titanic.
That's right.
That's great. I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I'm gonna share again, and we're gonna see what happens.
As for those, we had a big tech crash down this afternoon getting ready for this meeting, which is why we had to. All right, it's up there now.
Is that working? All right.
Cool.
All right, but now it's not advancing.
Ah. Oh. Thank you. But now it's not. Way to ruin it. Okay. Thank you for noticing that, Donna. I would have not noticed. So
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
That means people following along at home.
Sorry, it's
Sorry.
a Russian.
Liar.
Or
You want to have a chair?
is it possible that you have to click it down on the laptop instead of, do you know what I mean? Like use the arrows on the laptop instead of.
Go back.
No.
Just thinking out loud.
All right, so we've got our
You don't have to squash that much.
So next, so when we think about any organization, there's kind of three things that come up. One is vision. So where are we going? We're gonna spend a lot of time on that tonight because that's where you're at. The next is external authority. So who do you have to get approval from to do what you want to do? So for these folks over here, it might be me. For me, it might be you. And for you, it might be the voters, but or in the state government or federal, whoever it is. So there's always someone who you have to bring along. Next. And then there's your capacity. What do you know how to do? So do you have the right people? Do you have the right equipment, the right knowledge? And so how next? So obviously, if you've got, the idea is that what in here is what we do best. So great example, snow plowing, right? Everybody thinks that we should plow snow here in Vermont, right? The people who vote, the city council, everybody thinks we should plow snow. And we have snow plows, we have people with CDLs, we have salt. We do a good job of plowing snow. So it's not a controversial issue. So as we think about things, think about what we need to move something forward. Because the more we can push those circles together, the more effective we're going to be. So as you think, it's like it might be something the council wants to do and the staff can do, but we don't know if the voters will go along with this, or we don't know if people that are stakeholders. A good example would be the camping policy we've just been talking about, right? We think we need to do it. We think we have the people to do it, but outside folks aren't there yet. So what do we need to do to make this successful? So that's kind of what today is all about. So go back to our iceberg. So this is kind of your vision, right? This is where you want to go. This is where you're headed. This is kind of this line is right where people are saying yes, no, and then way down here is your capacity. And this is kind of the sweet spot. This is, maybe there's stuff down here that we know how to do that we really don't need to do much anymore, or it's just kind of, it has to be done, but it's not something people get excited about. And there may be stuff out here that's really a reach. And then there's stuff that the people haven't quite bought into yet. But this is kind of where hopefully we can be. So taking a look at our roles, who's our external authority? States, federal governments, voters. The vision is really the mayor and the city council and the manager, to the extent that we and the staff recommend things to the council to then consider. And then the capacity is really the manager and staff. to get the job done. So that's how those roles fit into those circles. So what do the voters do? They elect you all, they vote on budgets, bonds, engage in local discussions. They're the external authority. So they're the owners and customers. And this is kind of interesting take. So person comes to city council and says, you know, I've lived here, I support this, and I just really feel this is a wrong thing to do. This isn't the way we should go. They're an owner because they have a stake in the city and they want to see things go a certain way. Person comes in and says, hey, you know, this pothole on my street hasn't been fixed. That's more of a customer. I pay my taxes, I buy good roads, I'm not getting them fixed. So in some cases, the owner, some cases, the customers. Your role is, go ahead. So the role of the council, obviously, is you establish the vision, policy, and rules. And how do you do that? Your budget, that's your number one policy document. How you collect and spend other people's money. You're choosing to prioritize spending this collective sum on what are the most important things for the city. How you regulate? What standard? What are the standards for the community? How do you, what can you use? Zoning laws, ordinances, whatever those might be. Fiscal oversights, making sure that the community is running well, you're approving contracts, those kind of things you have to do. Overseeing the city manager who oversees the staff. So is your policy being implemented the way you want? And addressing controversy. Remember, we talked about owners versus, the owners were kind of controversy, the customers are the complaints. So really, you should be the ones, you're the owner's representatives in that regard. You're the ones that sort out the controversies. And then the council speaks with one voice. Just an important thing to remember. All of you have important roles and voices, but as a group, you only act when you act in concert. So that's where your authority and your decisions come. So once, again, once you make a decision, it's best if you can say, okay, now the council's spoken, that's our policy, even if you were on the losing side of the vote. So the role of the manager, implement the city council's policy through staff. Obviously, one person doesn't do it all, but it's by guiding the staff. So we make sure everything gets done. Recommend policy to council. Provide advice and information to the council. The chief administrative officer of the city. You can, hire, fire, supervise, manage, etc. Constituent service. So again, we're really the people should be addressing the complaint. So if the customer didn't go right, then we should be trying to fix their complaint. If it's a policy controversy, that's the council needs to fix that. And then follow the ICMA code of ethics as a member of ICMA. I have a certain ethical standard, which I try to apply to all our staff. And then manage the internal capacity. So we're the capacity piece. So what are policy decisions, right? Think of it like an airplane. You choose where you want to go. You choose the time you want to get there. And you choose how much you want to pay. So you can go nonstop in first class, or you could take, cargo class and, 4 layovers. And that's a different, so that's really kind of what you're doing. Where is it? And that's what your vision to. Where is it we want to go? How fast do we want to get there? It's going to take us 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 6 months, whatever it is. And are we willing to actually spend the money that it's going to take? So think of yourself like continuing the plane, right? Here you are, purpose and vision, you're up here. This is you thinking, this is what we're getting some of this tonight. What is it we're doing? And see, that's really council. As you look at it, the green is council, the white is staff. Then your strategic goals. So now we're getting into, okay, we've got a vision now, how are we gonna go forward? And now you're picking action items. So you're establishing them. We're sort of making sure they get done. You're planning and oversight. That's, adopting your budget, the stuff that happens at the meetings, the reports you get, the updates. Authorizing contracts, this is the project. Now we're running the project. You're just getting updates and doing what you need to do. And then finally the day-to-day work. You're obviously hearing from people about it. And you have a role, but really that's staff. So kind of landing the plane. So we're hoping that we're going to be spending our time here up in the sky. We'll have more time to get to this in this process another night. So what is strategic planning? It's basically how do we identify the needs and priorities? What are the strategies and actions to execute that vision, and then create a blueprint so that we use when we're doing the budget and all those kinds of things. And obviously we become flexible with move flexible.
Oh, I can type.
We'll just move past that slide.
Okay. What is strategic planning? So again, where we want to be, how do we plan to get there? How will we know we're there? What resources do we need? Because again, we may not have the capacity. Maybe something we really want to do. Maybe the public thinks we ought to do it, but we don't know how to do it. We don't have the money to do it. We don't have the expertise. Okay, so there's a cycle of planning. I'm not gonna- You have this all in front of you, so I'm not going to read through it, but basically you start with your mission, vision, values. We take a look at where we are, where we want to go, what are our strategies and things. We start looking at reports of how we're doing, what we need, and then we come back around and we start the circle all over. So a little more simply. So this is kind of where we're going to be tonight. So we start with our vision. This is where we want to be. Where are we headed? Why we exist? What do we do? What are our cultures and beliefs? What are our goals and areas? And then finally, what are our strategies to achieve the goals, and then specific initiatives and specific projects to adopt all that. So we are hoping we maybe get into here tonight and come back for. So in 2018, we did this process. This hangs on my wall in the office. I'm not going to read them all, but that was what the council brainstormed as vision then, where we want to see, where we see Montpelier in 10 years. We're going to do something like that tonight. We'll have you brainstorm, and then we'll come back with a draft vision statement. That we didn't do that last time. Same thing with mission. We didn't do the mission statement at all. This is a terrible one. I just wrote it for the slide. It's pretty. It's not at all what our mission statement is or what we think it is. So again, we'll have you brainstorm for a few minutes what you think the mission of city government is, and we will come back based on what that says with a draft. And our values. So again, our organizational values. A few years ago, our staff chose these as our organizational values for our staff. And we try to incorporate them into things we do. I would say we're so successful at it. The council did endorse those, but never really adopted them. For the council, you've adopted your rules of procedure. We did a lot of work on group norms and how you behave when we're yourselves. One area that we haven't really talked about are what our community values. And I think those are really established through the goals and priorities that you set. But there may be, I don't know if we want to get into that today, something to think about in the future if we want to set. This is just what we value in our community. And again, when we talk about inclusion as one of the goals, those kinds of things, what are our community values? So the next steps, we're going to try to look at all the big picture planning. We're going to try to tie that all in. We're going to create goals. So the goals might be, and I'll go through that in a minute. So create goals and strategies and initiatives. And we've talked about that. But, so here's your end product is your strategic plan. So it's a transparent document that everyone can see. It clearly states the goals and priorities, articulates our strategies, basically ties into all the work that we do. It's a framework for future decision. So as you know, those of you that have been around, on your agendas, it tells you which goal this ties into. Our weekly reports are tied into the goals. And it provides clear direction to staff. Is this an important thing for the council? So if we have to make a decision in between a council meeting, it's like, this is really consistent with where the council wants to be. Let's just do this. Or, I don't know, we might want to put this on an agenda. Let's see where that fits. So do's and don'ts. This is an organized group decision. So Jim Collins, the business guru, says if you have more than 3 priorities, you have no priorities. So one of the things, now obviously that's for a business. We have a lot of things we're going to ask you at the end of tonight to adopt all the goals that you want, but then select the 3 that are really the top priority, things that you think are really the top issues for the city right now. We're going to begin with vision and goals first. So that, again, Stephen Covey says begin with the end in mind. Don't fight every battle. There's a lot of stuff we can spend a lot of time fighting. It might just be you identify this as an issue and say, okay, we'll talk. That's one of our goals is to talk about it later. So I don't know if any of you are still here that were there, but a number of years ago, the city council had economic development, support economic development. But then we got talking about what does that mean? It turned out that there were 7 different opinions of what economic development were. We kind of went round and round, and the only goal that we got was later on this year, we're going to have an agenda item to try to decide what economic development is. That was okay because we didn't fight. We didn't spend our time in this session fighting that battle. So if it's something that needs to be discussed later, put it on a list to be discussed later. And don't waste time telling the pilot how to fly the plane. We'll get to those projects and things, but really this is not to talk about specific, this department doesn't do this. We'll get to that, but right now, this is really the big picture. So process recommendations, coordinate with existing plans. We've got a long list of them, but we have a lot of plans. So how can those tie into these plans? Be realistic and honest. I mean, sure, you'll be honest with you, but be honest about what can really get done and what the capacity is, what the vision is, what the, it's great to think about all these things, but then at some point you gotta say, hey, what can we do with what we have? So this is Teddy Roosevelt and Barry in 1912. Why do I have Teddy Roosevelt and Barry in 1912? Number one, it's a cool picture that he was in Barry. Number two, I did a presentation like this to the Barry City Council a couple of weeks ago, and so I thought they'd like it. And number three, this is a famous Teddy Roosevelt quote. And it's just meant to be a little inspiration to you. It is very sexist because of its time. And I've only hidden
One hopes.
right. But basically, it says it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory or defeat. So you're the folks in the arena, and you're going to be criticized, and you're going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to have people that aren't there, but you and these folks here are the ones that are doing it. So set your plans, set your course, and go for it. So any questions on this part of the section? I'm going to turn over to Cameron for the process. But any questions on sort of overview, but anything about roles, what strategic planning is? Did I talk too much? Let's go. Let's get all our circles lined
I
up.
would just say the people in the arena also are like the employees, like they're the staff, they're the staff, like, fair enough, we're in it too, but I just want to recognize.
I thought I said that.
Maybe you did.
Yes, no, you're right.
Yeah.
So let's go get our circles lined up. And Cameron, you're on.
Yeah, let's get excited.
Thank you, Bill.
Want to get energized.
Do this. Without being, oh, yeah, you can use the wheel. All right, we're cooking now. All right, so we have some expectations we just want to make sure everyone is aware of. We're going to work inside your group norms that you've already identified. Everyone's opinion is really valid here. Nothing is off the table. If you want to throw it out there, I'm going to write it down. All right. We're going to work through these topics with no interruptions, but do know I've put some breaks in there, so we're not going to be working straight through. Again, no ideas are bad ideas, but trust and honesty in each other, and this process is going to be really important. So we're going to have a couple different
Just first, we have a new counselor, like
Yeah.
those group norms. Like,
You got your handbook, correct?
and,
Yes.
And so the group norms are in that handbook. If you need.
Better at my best.
We'll get you one.
I'll let you one right now, Will.
Mostly it's listening, being respectful of other people's opinion and talking through disagreements instead of going head to head. But Bill is going to get you one of those. So we do have a couple things that I'd like to come out of today's meeting with that I'd like to set up first. We're going to do some big picture brainstorming in the beginning just to get juices flowing. We're going to talk about what your overall vision is. I don't expect anyone to write a vision statement. I just want your gut reaction. What is your vision for the future of Montpelier? Think 10 years from now, where do you want us to be at? And then we're all going to write that down. And the goal for us is to take all of that, synthesize it, write something we think you would like based off what you just said to us tonight. And we'll start a conversation about vision statements using that. Then we're going to brainstorm that mission statement, which sort of drills down a little bit of like, how do we as the city really manage that larger vision, right? And then, so again, staff will return to y'all with formal language for feedback and edits. It's just a starting point for y'all. And then what we're gonna do and spend the bulk of our afternoon or evening doing is brainstorming and voting on your preferred goals. So what we're gonna do for a bit is just really spit out goals. Go around the room, sort of talk about your big goal items, what you really wanna see. You have goals already established, maybe you don't like them, maybe you'll throw them all away. I don't recommend that, but maybe you want to. And then I know that some of y'all will have strategies, things that are not those larger goals, such as like environmental stewardship, but the strategies, like projects that you want to see, and that you're very passionate about. We'd like to hear those too, because we'd like to see how that aligns with work we're already doing, or if it's brand new, how do we accomplish that work for you? So those are the two big takeaway items that we'd like to get out of today. So, but because connection before content is important, and we also do have a new council member, we're gonna do brief personal introductions. I think that's really important. So if everyone doesn't mind just going around, introducing yourself, give a brief personal introduction, maybe why you ran for office or why civic duty is important to you. And if you have a fun fact that you want to share, feel free, no pressure. Yeah. I'll start, I guess, because I'm not sure you necessarily know who I am and why I'm talking to you right now. But my name is Cameron Niedermeyer. I'm the assistant city manager. I have been working in public service almost my whole career when I wasn't waiting tables. And it's very important to me to give back to my community. A fun fact is that I used to work in an organization that had more people that worked for the organization than lives in this entire town. So, so this has been a big change for me. I came from North Carolina and now I know how to snowshoe. And I think I'm the only person in my family who's ever even seen a snowshoe. So very excited. So I'll pass it to Connor.
Sure, and I guess we're dressing Jennifer for the most part. I know each other. Connor Casey, been on council. This is the end of the second term. I think I ran, like, in my job, I'm usually a campaign manager. I ran the Vermont Democratic Party. And I was always electing people into office. So it was interesting to maybe switch roles and become a candidate myself. And I probably never hated a candidate as much as myself, like working for them. So it's been a really good experience to sort of try to take some of the pulse of the city here. And I think the great thing is you can actually see like differences being made. You can see something being built. You can see a policy passed that affects somebody. So yeah, no, it's been a great experience. And I guess I was baptized by a priest in the IRA. So
Donna Bate, I'm in my fourth term, which will be up in March, which in one hand has gone really fast and the other hand is like, whoa, it's a lot of hours. And I ran for office at the time. There was an attitude in the city council that bothered me, in that I felt that they were making decisions without really deciding their vision. And I really wanted the vision in my mind, even when I made the little decision. So I might not have the money now, but I want to know where that money was going to. And I felt like over time that council has gotten there, and it's marvelous to experience. It's just marvelous. And fun fact, I like baking pies.
All right, Jack McCullough. I'm in the same position that you were in. I first came on the council by being appointed when the mayor vacated her council seat to become mayor.
And controversial.
Yes.
You do it every time.
Yes, you can go back and on YouTube and see the video of the meeting at which I was appointed.
Whoa.
And like Cameron, I've always been doing public service my whole life. I'm a legal aid lawyer. I've been a legal aid lawyer for over 40 years. And I keep telling people I'm never going to retire because I love what I do. I love the city, and I always tell people it is the best place in Vermont to live. And what got me specifically into deciding to run for council is to work on, the biggest goal that I've worked on in Montpelier life is housing. And that's one of the things that's really motivating. And I don't know if I have any fun facts. I'm not really a fun guy.
Should we go all over your kids? Ann Watson, this is my second term as mayor. Before that, I was a city councilor, and actually originally someone asked me to run and I was appointed. I was also appointed as a city councilor that originally. And yeah, I guess I was really interested in putting my name in for that appointment because I have always had a passion for energy. I'm kind of an energy nerd, and like around renewable energy, etc. I teach high school physics and engineering and math, and so spent a lot of time thinking about energy and climate change, honestly. So that's a big thing for me. And fun fact, I suppose, when I was in the second grade, I broke my elbow, had a cast for a while. When I got it off, I did physical therapy, and I loved doing the physical therapy so much that I can bend my one elbow backwards.
Change the conversation.
Yeah, you know, my fun fact is not going to be that fun. It's, you know, just weird human things, I guess.
Well, my name is Jennifer Morton, and I have lived here in Montpelier for 6 years. My husband is from here, and we had very small children, and we're contemplating moving to Portland, Oregon, and it was either LA or here, and I grew up in LA, so I said, let's go to Vermont, because I want my kids to be able to play in the woods. And I love this small little town. It reminds me a lot of Olympia, Washington, which is another place that I love. But I was recommended to run by my neighbors, and you know, I'm Ojibwe, and part of our culture is to give back to our community. And I haven't left Montpelier, and I don't have any intentions of leaving Montpelier at this point. My family is very bought in here. My kids are growing up in the schools here, and yeah, we don't want to leave. So I want to serve my community. I already spent 4 years as a commissioner on the Commission of Native American Affairs for the state of Vermont for 4 years. And I would like to do something a little more local. And I want my daughter to see that you can do whatever you want, even if you didn't realize that's what you wanted. Because, you know, I mean, this is a big thing, and it's a big responsibility, and I just turned 50 and I want to take on more things. So that sounds weird, but I don't know. I've got this weird renewed sense of spunk. So here I am. And then a fun fact about me, I worked in the music industry for about 20 years, and I was working the Grammys one night, and I got pushed into a platter of hummus the size of this table by Whitney Houston. It was epic, and one of my favorite stories.
Any pictures?
I'm sure there are pictures somewhere of me elbow deep in hummus.
Oh my god.
And you survived.
I did.
It's amazing and terrible. Or awesome. I don't know.
Maybe everything.
All
All
of
the
the
above.
things.
So I'm Pearl and District 1, and this is my third year on council, and really I've worked pretty much my whole career on environmental policy, and I worked in DC, so I had done like the federal thing, and then moved to Vermont and was working on state level policy, and then was really drawn to kind of how Connor was talking about the like being able in your own community to see change and like really do tangible change, like it's a lot more just academic at the state or federal level in a lot of ways. So just the ability to work with the community and give back was inspiring. And then it's been such a great group of people to work with. So it's been ran again. And let's see, fun fact. I lived out of a pickup truck for a year and a half in my 20s. So love to travel. So I've been all over the world, and we were like just doing like a greatest hits tour of like Mexico to through like Western North America to Canada, and then moved to South Africa for a little while, just living out of a truck. And somehow found my way to Vermont.
I'm Jay Harrison. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here, Jennifer, and to be back again this year. On our next round of strategic planning and in person, not just on computer screens, which is fantastic. This is still my first term as a counselor. I've ran, I think because of, like a lot of folks here, I love this city, you know, and I'm a business owner and I'm raising my young kids here, and I felt like this was a way to give back and an opportunity to be able to, you know, make a difference. You know, going into it, 2 Marches ago, you know, we all came into it with a sort of a different perspective, and with the pandemic, you know, the world has shifted, but I still feel like we are you know, doing good things and doing, you know, really believe in what we're doing and doing the best we can. And I appreciate that. So, you know, last year on Zoom, I mentioned that I actually made a cameo in The Big Lebowski. Pretty cool, but I don't know how that compares to the comments with Whitney Houston. I don't know, like that kind of, we'll have to decide. You know.
I think they're even. The Big Lebowski is a big one.
You know, to be in any film, that was pretty cool. But one other thing though, and this was like, feels like a lifetime ago, but I actually used to work for a television production company that, and I was the head writer, and we wrote, I wrote TV shows about fly fishing around the world, and we actually won an Emmy, and I was part of that team. So that's kind of cool.
That's pretty cool.
So just keeping in the Hollywood theme, we gotta keep it there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm Bill Fraser. I'm the city manager. I've been in this role for 26 years. Been in local government really since I got out of college, so closing in on 40 years. I've worked in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts. Obviously 26 years in Vermont, the rest of the time in the other states in 5 different communities. I've raised 4 kids here in Montpelier. All went K-12 in the school system. That was one of the reasons we stayed. We came, you know, great place to work for the same reasons we did. I'm originally Maine native. And my grandfather was a state legislator in Maine. So when I was a kid, I got involved. Both my parents were educators, so dedicated to public service, and just seemed to be something I was drawn to. I was a sort of a junior high kid during the Watergate era, so I got hooked on politics and that kind of thing, and just pursued this. And you know, like many, I see local government as a place where you can make a difference, and if you don't do it right, you hear about it, and I like that. It's immediate and fun fact. Well, I was in the music business too, but only kind of around here for about 10 or 11 years. I guess I met the Starline Rhythm Boys a few times. That's about it. Jack used to be a groupie. Still have the t-shirt, right? So, yeah, I played in the band for 10 or 11 years.
Oh, nice.
And I would love for our department directors who are here in person to just say their name and their department so that you can meet them all.
Hi Jennifer, we met yesterday. I'm Robert Gallants. I'm the fire chief.
Like rugby finance director.
Blake Miller, Director of Planning and Community Development. Oh, you're not.
He doesn't work here, yeah.
You say this, and you don't work here?
He works for Cameron.
He works for me.
Allie Gillsworth, the Parks Director.
All right, so thank you all for indulging us. I think that was really important. So what we're gonna do next is really get into those higher level discussions. And I think this will be really fun because like Bill said, we really want to begin with the end in mind. So that very top thing, what does Montpelier look like if we've accomplished all our goals? We've set out to do what we've set out to do. So again, the vision is the very top is what we're going to be talking about first, and that's the future state, what we're choosing to be, what our goals are. And so again, this was sort of your vision from before. A lot of things you said were like, I want to be a great place to live, visit, work, and play, be a leader, be innovative for serving the community, a place where people want to be day and night. I think that one's a really important one. And so we're going to spend exactly 15 minutes sort of going to set a timer because tonight's going to get lengthy, I think. But I'd really like for either your choice, you can either round robin it or we can just shout things out. I think whatever works. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
I don't want to upend things. And
No, you're fine.
And if we can adapt, that'd be great. But if it's too much, then don't worry about it. But having gone through this process with a lot of organizations and brands over the years, it's always been about kind of working your way up the pyramid, not working from the top down, because I think conversation, it's really easy to think about details and weeds and get in the weeds and think about how things will actually happen without it, you know, like if you start too high and then work down, like to me, working our way up that pyramid, talking about what our values are, and then deciding like, okay, then given the values, what can we then leave there and then figure out what's our mission then, and then from there it's what's our vision, which is really that top of the pyramid,
Right.
because it's
So I would sort of, I mean, it's up to y'all what you want to do, but I would sort of argue that a little bit to say, if you don't know where you want to even go, if you have no idea and what we're creating is just initiatives like projects that we like and want to move forward to get to that vision, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. If we say, I want Montpelier to be a great place to live, work, and recreate, point blank, how are we going to get there? Then that helps us build goals. If the goal is I want to be a good, and I'm making all this up, by the way, don't quote me on any of these things as far as vision statements, but if your vision statement is I want Montpelier, sorry, to be a place to live, work, and recreate, how do we become a good place to live? We need affordable housing, we need more housing. How do we get more housing? If we want it to be, if I'm using that quote as the continued vision statement, how do we make it a place where people feel safe to recreate? So that's public safety, that's our parks and rec infrastructure. So, you know, I'm not sort of asking y'all to be in the weeds on this, just honestly, if you could look at me and say, Montpelier would be great and perfect if it was X, and this statement encaptures that, I think that would really help us while we're talking about those goals. Because if we know where we want to end up, it might be easier to talk about the goals and how to get to there. Y'all are free to disagree with me and we can move it back and into the goal conversation first. But I do think that there is value in talking about the end goal. And it could be honestly aspiration. You could say, I want there to be more houses than people. Like honestly, that we can put that in there. That could be a vision that we are just putting in there and putting in the room, right? So I'd love to hear feedback if that's something that you guys are amenable to, or what steps you would like to take.
But I mean, I've already expressed my advice. I think the vision is where you have to go to decide anything else. But that's just where I'm coming from. And like you, except I'm a lot older, I've gone through a lot of these, and you know, there's lots of ways to get there. But I just do feel that starting at the top and working down works better for me. That's all.
Okay.
I just want to weigh in here too. Again, at least our training was always start with the why. And so how and when and whatever. I want to be clear, we're not going to ask you to draft a vision statement tonight. We're just kind of brainstorm some ideas of where you see Montpelier going. We're going to write them all down and we'll come back to the draft. Vision statement. So we aren't going to spend a lot of time in the weeds of wordsmithing something because that could take us all night.
Yeah.
And same thing with mission. We just want to get so that you're thinking about what the big foundations, where we're going, and then we want to get right to the substance as soon as we can.
Which is
Yeah,
why,
and I'm totally fine with that. And I'm not trying to upend by any means, but I also appreciate that sometimes it's hard to establish a vision if you haven't figured out your mission and your values first. And so we can start there, but work our way backwards. But I just don't,
I think that's fair.
then ultimately it's about conversation and then distilling down, right?
Right.
So honestly, we could start in any direction, but
I think that was
I
also.
just want to make sure we're keeping in mind what our goals are.
Definitely. And I think that is where we're going to get to eventually in this, and that hopefully this is just a brain opening exercise. And anything that we talk about tonight is being recorded, and we're writing it down. We're going to go back, and all of this, none of this is going to be left on the drawing board, right? All of this will be coming back to you in one way or the other. So I'm gonna write vision here, and I'm gonna not spell things correctly. And
It's a test. It's a test for us.
and we're not gonna call me out on it. That's what's gonna happen. So I will type it, and spell check will help us. So I'm gonna set a timer, and we'll sort of get started. So if you had a vision statement, and what would it be? Or if you had a vision
in
in
2031.
yeah,
All students, no, I'm sorry, all,
Nope. You're good.
there is affordable childcare available for all children from birth till through high school.
throw it out there.
That the city takes a role in human services, not only childcare, but that they're making partnerships with nonprofits and the state to really have a holistic approach to people's quality of life. And to me, that it's childcare, that's anyone who's homeless, it's mental health, it's drugs, it's all of it.
Our city is an affordable place for working families.
What about safety?
Montpelier is a safe place for communities of color.
See that the rivers that run through our city are part of our day-to-day life.
Our parks. Yeah.
What about businesses? So we're talking a little bit about people coming here. There's a safe place for a community. We could maybe talk about our businesses as well, our business community. That sparked anything for anybody?
Well, before we get to that, I want to say the city is welcoming and affordable to everyone who wants to live here.
For a few thoughts, then we've got clean, safe water, drinking water, swimming, all that, that we are fully renewably powered. That we have climate resilient infrastructure. That we've eliminated homelessness.
city is an attractive place for socially responsible businesses.
So when you say that, what do you mean?
I don't think regulations are bad necessarily, but we want to attract not just businesses, but businesses that pay a livable wage, are environmentally responsible. Don't just try to milk the resources of the town and treat their workers well.
So I want Montpelier to be a really fun place to live.
Yeah.
Whether that's like,
No, that's a vision.
like festivals or spaces.
Being somebody who grew up in a very large city and then moving to a very small city, the things that happen here, like Valentine's Day, the Valentine's Day Bandit, and the father-daughter dance, and all those little things that happen here is what made me fall in love with Montpelier. Is All Species Day and having more things like that, because that really feels unique to Montpelier and unique to Vermont and small towns, I think. You right now, but
Alex's vision of our like outdoor rec club that we draw people.
Oh, boy. Doing good. Doing good. Heard Alex vision outdoor recreation as what?
A place, a destination people come to play and
Destination and help.
I would add that we have an engaged and informed constituency.
And so I think that starts another point is what is your ultimate vision for how people engage with government? Because if we're doing our job right, where does that take us? What is that vision?
But the how would be another step, not in the vision. The vision is to have them engaged. I didn't think at this stage we would talk about how we would do it.
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I meant like, are people engaged? Well, never mind. I'll not even go down that path. We're just moving on from that path. All right.
Well, I have something to add to that, that we are communicating via multiple channels and methods to the public.
and be accessible.
This looks really good. I think there's some things I see that may be missing is like, I think Anne spoke a little bit to this for childcare, but I think that ties directly into like the health of our community. If anyone has any ideas off of that. We can also talk about some of our roads or other infrastructure, safe community, I'm thinking of some of our bigger services here for the city.
Where we want to be maintaining and improving our city infrastructure, all of our.
Multimodal infrastructure, right?
Well,
Or not.
I wasn't thinking of it necessarily just in terms of transportation. But
Yeah.
because that's another part of it.
So I'm also hearing
Yes, buildings, all of it. Yeah.
modal transportation. And maintaining and improving our infrastructure.
Well, and maybe we should have the word green in here. Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe that's covered somewhere else, but when he mentioned infrastructure, as far as buildings, operations, be more energy aware.
Great.
If we get an Energy Star, it'd be a city with an Energy Star.
Yes, energy, water quality,
Yep.
the stormwater plan we're talking about.
So there's that stormwater up here with our clean,
Yep.
safe water.
including our stormwater. I don't know how to, I'm still struggling with the words on this one, but something about public safety systems that are compassionate, but also effective and trusted. What was your other word? Trusted, compassionate, effective.
City government should be a desirable place to work, and we should give our staff the resources they need to succeed.
In the infrastructure one, just accessibility to. You know what? I'm gonna put that as a totally separate thing.
Well, you're thinking like ADA. Yeah.
I would also, our website, our communications, I think that also plays a big role in accessibility here.
Oh, the mode and cost.
Sorry, say that again?
There's accessibility dealing with mode, like reading or not reading, not speaking, as well as not moving in the ways that we can access a building, but I think it's also cost. Like running for city council. I mean, we've all talked about that our stipend is not enough to allow many people to run. Taking time off to take advantage of some of the public meetings, just as an active citizen.
So I'm hearing making city engagement, or city engagement is, for definitive vision statement in here, is accessible and doable for all. Fill this pen.
Making sure that there's support services for folks that are experiencing homelessness. Making sure that people that work downtown have access to mental health first aid training. No.
Disaster readiness.
We are disaster ready. This looks good. I'm excited about this. Y'all filled up a bunch of.
It's only 15 minutes.
No, not yet.
Good.
Probably close. You said good. I want
You don't have to fill the 50.
No, you know, that's what I was saying this before. So go to the next, we'll spend more time on that one.
Okay. Does everyone feel pretty good about these vision statements that we've gotten to?
Yep.
Okay. So now we're going to, I mean, you were really close. There's only a couple seconds left, but
Oh, shoot.
I know, sorry. So now we're
Council's known for taking all the time.
So we're also just going to skip right ahead to talking about more of what a mission statement is. So I want to hear from you, and I think that this is important as staff to say, why are we doing what we're doing, right? So these are all the things that you said are the end goal, right? So why do we exist? What are those goals that you do have? This is this time to start thinking about those goals. Like Jay was saying, you know, you're starting to understand what we even do as a government. What is our role as government in this community? So role statements work here, statements about why government is important, what you think we do best, and what you think, even if you say, I want to improve on X, Y, and Z, that also goes well here if you're interested. So It also can talk about our target audience too. We serve who? What do we do and who does it serve? So it's slightly different. But you can see, this is our current mission statement, which is serving Montpelier with integrity is our craft. This is a very internal one, but it is in your handbooks as well. And craft is our values of staff of confidence, respect, accountability, fairness, and teamwork. Now, to be frank, that's not quite a mission statement, because it doesn't really hit on the core points of why we're doing what we're doing and who we hope to serve doing what we're doing. But it does, I think, highlight some of those values that we had been talking about earlier. So again, I think we're gonna only spend about 15 minutes sort of like hashing out what we think our mission is. And I'm gonna just hand these off to.
When we did our new logo, we did at that time
We did
for
a branding statement.
a branding statement. Is that around? I
Yeah,
think
it's
it's
in,
like,
it's in your handbooks. It's right at the beginning of your handbooks.
okay, I didn't bring my handbook with me. Okay. There you go.
Member Morton's prepared.
And
That's the whole thing about the soil.
Yes, I really liked it.
and once we're done with this, we'll take our first break and then we're gonna head right into goals and it will be way longer than 15 minutes. Timer is set. Let's go.
That's an older version. so.
The branding statement.
Okay, mission.
So maybe let's start with why. Why Montpelier government? Why do we exist? Why do y'all exist? What is your role?
What about like something like our success is reflected in how we treat our most vulnerable residents?
That's good. And you don't need to craft statements necessarily, but why is the government, why are we here? Why is
What's our
council
role
here?
in
What
the
is our
community?
role? We treat.
What do we do?
We're a service, right? So we're serving our local community.
Mhm.
Like liaisons.
Maybe think about actual functions of city government. What are things, what's
Yeah,
our
so-
mission? What do we do?
Yeah, what are we serving our local community? We could say things like safe roads. So what do safe roads lead to? Safe travel. Leads to economic development, right? Because people can go to their jobs. That's an example. So what else are we serving our local community?
We're trying to create conditions in which people can thrive.
Safely. I guess thriving is, safe is a verb,
Yeah.
and thriving, okay.
And that includes moving here and having housing, being able to create and operate businesses and work in those businesses, raise their families.
Access local resources.
Enjoy the natural resources, yeah.
So it would be, I'm leading the witness here, so I'm leading the witness, I'm looking at Alex. So would providing some of those resources for, is that a role to provide parks and recreation facilities for people to have fun and do? Is that something we do? Is
Yeah.
that part of our mission?
When we serve our guests. as well as making the location and inviting to guests. That makes sense.
And inviting. And how do we get there? And how do we get there is sort of how we're gonna get into that goal conversation. So again, we're working our way down that pyramid, right? So we're gonna relate to some of this when we talk about how do we create an inviting community? Is that through parks? Is that through good roads? So what else are these overarching things that we serve our community? Why do we exist? What is our role?
What do we do? Sorry if I'm being redundant here. I'm just trying to
go
look
for it.
through, but it's leveraging our local business and natural resources to make Montpelier a inviting destination
To live and play.
to live in, not to visit, to play and to live. Because I think, tourism is a big part, leveraging those pieces to promote tourism certainly helps.
Oh, no, I totally agree with you. I just was inserting that not only visit us, but also come and live here. That's all. That's all.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think to some extent, as a state capital to be a model community for the rest of the state.
That's a good one.
When you say model community.
I'd probably pile on everything we just said.
Okay.
It sounded like it's right in,
I'm not as altruistic. I want it to be good for me. And then if we're a model, great.
Well, I think
You're
that
competitive, huh?
I think that part of that though is that as the capital, that we accept a leadership role in the state.
Yeah, no, fair play.
I think that's important in what we're doing. Yeah.
I don't know if it's true of all capitals. Some capitals I think are much more, I call passive.
Yeah,
And they sort of
you're right.
take all the advantages of being the capital,
Yeah.
but they don't have the assertiveness that I think Montpelier sort of bought
I agree.
into.
I
Which is
agree,
a real difference.
So, I'm trying to push you, let's think a little bit of what we do. So we've talked about, these are, honestly, some of these are still great vision statements, and there's nothing wrong with that. So what is it the city does? Like, what's our mission? Why is there a charter? Why are city governments formed? What are this? We've got that survey. What's serving? I know it seems obvious, but we provide public safety services.
Yeah,
right?
it's public safety, we provide education, not city.
Yeah.
Road, utilities.
Water and sewer service.
Yeah.
These are all core missions that we do.
Like, sort of be a place you enjoy in the best of times, was like what Jennifer was saying, but also in your most devastating times, know that we're there for you, like chief shop there. If you have a health crisis or something, we're gonna be there responsive for you.
But that takes an organized entity. So the entity has to be really organized within itself. And take pride in its staff and its council and all of its committees. So that without that organized body, you can't do all these other things. So I don't know how to put that in here, but it seems like it's needed.
We keep track of, give or take $20 million of public money.
Yeah.
Where it
And
comes from, where it
records,
goes.
almost.
So that's
So,
important. That's a
yeah.
trust and accountability piece that we have to.
Yeah, so there's sort of, one of the functions would be like stewardship of public goods.
Yes, yes,
Which
I like
includes
that
the
word.
roads, includes the water.
Yes.
But also, I think there's a stewardship of public resources in general, which, I think also.
And that's some of maybe our planning and our regulations. That's how we do some of that. is through our-
Right, and I think there's something to, I'm sorry, I'm saying a couple things here in a row, but there's something about facilitating the democratic process, like where this is why we talked about engagement. Like, we want people to be engaged and informed and participating.
We conduct elections that people can trust the outcome, they trust the process, and
Integrity.
many people as possible can participate.
We keep land records and assessing records.
So
Those don't show up on visions, but it's part of good government, right? It's like the people, to make sure we're taxing people on a fair basis and people can look at their needs. It's our responsibility. That's part of our mission.
provide a whole range of public services in an excellent and professional and responsive way.
Don't we also carry what our community members are talking to us about?
Certainly the elected
Bringing that,
officials. absolutely.
Yeah.
bringing those concerns and needs from our community members that we represent to the table. Giving them voice.
So receptive and responsive to the voices of the community.
At the same time leading. And there's both. One's is responsive and one's saying,
Right.
we're also going to lead, like the energy and the green, and then pulling constituents with us
Well,
sometimes.
you think about your
But that's
circles,
leadership.
you got your vision and you're trying to get your
Yeah.
external authorizing
Yeah.
environment to line up.
Yeah.
And then build the resources to do it.
So I would also say, you're saying that we need to have those resources, right? So ensuring those resources are available.
Yes.
And planning for it.
It's a sustainability.
Planning is important. We're entrusted by the voters with the present and future of the city.
Something about the accountability to ensure that public dollars are spent well.
Y'all feel good?
Yeah.
All right. This is a lot. It's robust.
There's one word I just haven't heard, and maybe others, somehow is that respectfully engage. I think that's important. Almost true.
Oh, be quiet on
Lots of luck in that guy. I got his chair. But you know, he's a big guy, and doesn't move.
I still won't mess with that.
So as you think about it, you've talked about kind of where you want, big picture, where you want to see us go. And then we talk about how we do, what we do, what the government's role is. And then, so then your next, as we go into the next step, will be to talk about how we take what we do to start moving to where we want to be. Because again, it kind of goes to, can't be all things to all people. So how do we use what we have the authority to do, the ability. Again, we'll come back with drafts.
Yeah, but even if this, I mean, this ultimately is going to be reduced to sentences, but to name some of these things just livens them up. It's really good.
Well, it's good, and it's good for you to be thinking. Part of it's to get you-
One of the ways that I'm thinking about this is like, I'm just actually just going through the departments in my head. What is the mission? So, I'm not really the one to say like what the mission of that department is, but like letting departments and sort of inspire some of these statements. And one that I feel like could be more represented here is actually the Community Justice Center. And I know we said public safety, but something about providing a space for, maybe this is, I don't know what the right phrase is.
I think, some regards you covered, you talked about respectfully engaging.
Yeah.
You talked about people feeling, safe to be here, people, I think that's a lot of what they do is.
It'd be nice somehow to mention mediation and social.
Yeah, or like.
Justice center.
So again, you're gonna get, they're all gonna have a chance to weigh into all of this, so. And to develop their department priorities
Yeah.
based on what they're learning.
Right. In a sense, I feel like they facilitate difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Yes, like that's.
I think the only department I haven't heard really
Yeah,
talked about at all is maybe our senior center and aging in
nice.
place.
Sure.
We do have an aging population in
Yeah.
town. I think they're covered in a lot of this. I think the accessibility is really important. There's certainly an aging community here too.
Well, there is certainly an element of like providing resources, you know, I'm thinking about like the Meals on Wheels program, Feast. or whatever. Yeah. That's a. I mean, we often don't provide a lot of services like that, but that is a role
We
that
talked
we.
about in the vision about making things fun and affordable and some of those things, so.
But I see the senior center, like the childcare and like issues of homelessness, go back under that partnership with the city, state nonprofits and really doing more with that we can integrate that thoroughly.
So, you know, one of the things you didn't talk about, just this, I wish I thought of this when you were talking about vision. And I'm not trying to push you to talk about this.
Yeah, go ahead, push.
No, no, no.
Condition it, Bill, just say it.
Well, no, we didn't talk about whether we wanted the city to grow, you talked a lot
Yes.
about what
Yeah.
was great about the city.
Oh, yeah.
But you didn't, do we see it as being a larger city, approximately the same size, or do we see it being more residential, more, you know, I mean, we didn't, and I know some of that's gonna come up when we do the city plan, but it's just kind of interesting. We talked a lot about the character of the city, but not actually what it might look or feel like in terms of.
I think that's a great point. My vision for what the city is like includes growth, including more people coming here, more people being able to come here, consistent with our, or within the constraints of our,
Sorry.
within the constraints of our infrastructure, we could still support more people than we have now. If we could easily go to 10,000 people, and it would still be recognizably what it is now. 20,000, I don't know. 10,000, definitely.
Okay, so 10,000 is our mark.
That's a,
I-
you know,
I-
to say we
Yeah.
can envision our city growing to a population of 10,000, because then we can think about what we take, or not. I'm not trying to push that.
I don't say growth just for the sake of having bold growth.
No, I understand, but we'll get into that when
yeah.
we talk about the specifics, but just, is that a vision that we see this as a growth, you know, a place with more people living here in 10 years or 20 years?
Yeah.
Okay, part of that to me is like also like people of all ages and like
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Diverse demographic.
Yeah.
Assuming we meet all the other.
Yeah.
No, but that is it, I mean, that's.
Yep.
I made a separate vision board for that. We're good. Caught it.
We need more hummus divers.
So we have been talking. It is now 8:00, so it is break time.
Huzzah.
And then we're gonna jump right into goals, and that'll take us through the rest of the evening.
How long do you want us to take for a break?
10 minutes?
That's your call, Mayor.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, how long do you, I mean, usually we go 10. Is 10
That's fine.
too much?
It's fine.
No,
Ten.
it's not too much.
Okay.
No, really.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.
What's that? Kelly.
Youth covered situation. Start throwing paper at it.
Oh, yeah, fair.
That's how I get through.
Congratulations.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
No, that's super important. Oh, I thought this-
Yeah, I guess that.
Yeah, so. That's the time, yeah. Yes, I asked her if she knew the child. She was like, yeah.
Oh, and I was like, "Someone say council." She's like, what's that? And I was like, she doesn't, and I was, you
Why are you wearing your wrist? I was like,
But then when we get the
what's that?
Well, there is a-
Oh, gosh. My husband's like, we can watch on the computer. if you wanna watch." Yeah. We're trying to explain. You run,
I have never made it.
He's like, whatever. Mom."
Yeah.
Having a vehicle.
Like sometimes it's fun.
Oh, I don't know. That's, Roberto.
No, I know. That's funny. That's funny.
No.
Oh, they're not?
Yeah.
We're still.
It's up.
Okay, good. I was like, oh.
now we're gonna get into sort of the meat of what I'd like to do today, but I really think we're gonna get you out of here by 10 at least, or less, greatest, whatever. We're gonna manage this. So what we're gonna be talking about now is really the goals. And so y'all have already established goals in our previous strategic planning processes. But goals really are that, how do we prioritize city funds? It answers where do we want to be and what we want to do and what we want to accomplish as a city. So that's a fun backdrop, not scary at all. So a lot of this, we really do want to align with the city plan. Eventually, that is the goal, is to feed these annual strategic plans that y'all are creating into our larger infrastructure of the city plan. There can be as many or as little overall goals that council would like, but know that everything can't be an immediate priority. So that's something to keep in mind while you're talking about these. So what we're really talking about is short-term, medium, and long-term goals. So short-term goals are those low-hanging fruits or quick wins that are pretty short in time period, 2 to 3 months. Those are what I suggest that you don't focus on, because those are actions. Those are things that we can do to support your goals, right? If they're that easy to accomplish, chances are we're already working on them, to be perfectly frank. The plan sweet spot to me is this medium-term goals that sort of can be accomplished in 3 months to 3 years, right? These are the things that you can see us with prioritization of budget getting done sooner than our city plan tie-in, which is where we want to eventually get y'all. Is these plans not only feed into what you see as priorities for that year, so we can be quick and responsive as a community, as an organization to serve our community, but to also tie into our long-term goals that are being created right now through our planning department in partnership with community outreach, all of your committees, et cetera. So we're really creating a pyramid of our own with plans. So it's pretty exciting to me, but you know, you don't have to take my advice on this one at all, throw out whatever you want, but I do believe that our plan sweet spots are that 3 month to 3 year time window. So these are your 6 current strategic plan goals. These are the 6 things out of the 9, I believe you have, that were included in your strategic plan, because these are what a majority of you voted were most important for last year. So this is what we spent our time and our prioritization on for the last strategic plan. That included community prosperity, COVID-19 response, which gets back to my point about these being quick, responsive plans, responsive and responsible government, sustainable infrastructure, environmental stewardship, and more housing. So the things that you also had, because remember, you do have more goals than just that, but the ones that didn't rise to that priority level for you included inclusive, equitable, and engaged community, thoughtfully planned built environment, and public health and safety. When I say that they were not prioritized in your strategic plan, I do not mean that they were not important. So I think that's another thing that we got to get to. All of these goals carry equal weight. And so this year we're sort of asking you to come up with all of this huge list, and then at the end, vote for the 3 things you think will be most impactful for this year. We as staff, and we're just asking, that you can say this is a bad idea, you don't want to do it, that's fine. But this many of high priority goals were difficult to prioritize budgeting around, right? Especially in the time of COVID. COVID-19 was pretty much our #1 focus and had a lot of our funding going to that in a time where we didn't have a lot of funding, right? So all of these things were competing to your highest priority. So my goal, and again, pushback where needed, is to have your council strategic plan goals be 3 high priority, and then the rest of everything that you come up, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And so one of the other things that I think might be helpful as we think about this would be to look at these goals and think about them in terms of maybe adding an action verb on them. So like we say, sustainable infrastructure. Are we maintaining it? Are we trying to get there? You know, what's our action verb? Are we completing? Because those also have different sense of severity. So are we encouraging more housing? Are we gonna and then think about, not in maybe the title, more housing could be 100 new McMansions, or it could be affordable, so a range of housing. So I think as we get into the strategies below them, we need to think about being clear about what they mean. I mean, we figured these all out and they all have statements to go with them, but just as we think about maybe having clear things. And then I think just to set the stage, are you already going to talk about strategies?
We were gonna get there.
I know, but I just wanted to, so people are thinking ahead.
Yeah, sure.
So the next stage that would come after this would be strategy. So I'm just going to pick on, say, responsive and responsible government. So we say we want to have a responsible or maintain a responsible. So strategies might be maintain transparency, excellent communication, treat our workers well, whatever else they might be, good fiscal management, those kinds of things. That's your strategies. We'll come back and say, then here's some activities that would support those, and that's when pet projects and like the new website or something, that's where that could go. So we'll give some time in the meeting to throw out ideas for actions and projects, but then our staff's going to meet next week with what you come up with for goals and strategies and recommend, put together how we think we can accomplish them, and then you'll get a chance to look at that and say, we either like these or we don't, or we'd rather substitute this or whatever. So just so people are thinking at the level you'll be at tonight.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Can I back up just a minute? Because I always associate the action verb with the strategy and not the goal. And I know we constantly, which is which.
Well, the goal is.
But whoa, just to go back, when you said that you want us to add action verbs, but you also added, you wanted us to add action verbs that lended to a sense of priority.
Well, what I just mean is, let's say like more housing. Are we facilitating more housing? Are we building more housing? Or are we just creating more housing?
I thought they came under strategy.
Okay,
Okay.
well, what?
But no, correct me. I'm just trying to,
I guess the goal is what are we trying to do? And then the strategies are what are the types of things we would do to get there? And then we talk about initiatives and actions, what are the specific things that would take to meet those. As long as the ideas get down, we'll take it from there. So I don't want you to get hung up on not sharing ideas just because of the.
So the questions that we're posing to you tonight are those goals that we just listed, these ones, still feel appropriate? Do they still resonate with you? What would you like to change about them? Or would you like to add, take away, morph, etc.? These are the other plans that we've got going on. I just don't want them to be forgotten in our ultimate goals. I know a lot of y'all sit on these committees that have come up with some of these plans. So this could be sort of those actions that we start talking about too, is make sure the downtown master plan or the net zero plan, that's a strategy to create what we had earlier, which is the goal of environmental stewardship, right? We just want to keep those in mind while we're moving forward, that those do exist, and we don't want to be in conflict with those. That's something that staff will also be looking at to give you the sort of initiatives to accomplish your goals. We'll be looking at these as well. So our goal for tonight is brainstorming new or continued ideas for your fiscal year 2023 strategic plan goals. So this can take as little or as long as you would like. I'm going to keep it on this slide while we talk about it, so you already kind of know what your goals are. I think this one, the homework assignment was to think of these. So I think people have come with lists. So instead of just free yelling them, maybe we'll just go in a circle. Free yelling.
I guess I'm feeling like there's a lot of different things on the radar right now.
Mm-hmm.
One task that I feel like I heard was come up with action verbs for these
Well, so
strategies.
first
You do not have to.
Okay.
You
No.
don't have
Okay.
First decide if those are the goals you want, and then just how you state them is.
Right,
That's
right.
less
That was the
important.
second thing I heard was which of these things are your top three? And the third thing I heard was like of the lists of like the like actiony things that like I hope that we do, like what are they?
Right.
Do you?
So what I would like to do for this part of this is for us to, and y'all to brainstorm any new things that you would
Okay.
like to add to this. I will be writing them down,
Okay.
and then we'll be writing down these ones, and then we're going to be putting sticky dots next to them.
So,
just discuss and decide if you
Right.
think they still resonate.
or
if
what,
it's
or
different
whatever,
ones.
a voting process, we'll go through them, right? Because I think we could come up with like 40 goals if we sat around and thought about it. We just want to make sure that
But
they're
they
all
won't all end
represented.
up.
Well, so also I just want to jump in with I feel like we could potentially get weighed down with the verb like
Okay,
that.
Yeah, let's not worry about the verb.
Yeah, because
We'll put verbs, we'll suggest verbs. Let's take
yeah,
that out.
yeah.
That's not even a thing.
We're worried about.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, John,
Yeah.
you've been wanting to say something. Go
Well,
ahead.
it just seems to me that we have two on this second list that really belong, like inclusive, equitable, all that belongs over in responsible government to me. And likewise, thoughtful plan build belongs in sustainable infrastructure. And maybe people don't want them more condensed, but to me, that seems that they sit there and literally responsive and responsible government also includes public health and safety. But maybe you don't want to reduce it.
So just for background, the goal, this group was, I think, initially done 3 years ago, when we first had Julia here and the council was set at that time, and then we've kind of stuck with them since then and just modified them a little bit. So part of it is, okay, it's 3 years later, we get some difference in the council. Is this still where you want to be? So I think that's it. You know, you're not weighed down by a prior group's decisions unless you choose to. Secondly, there is a slight difference. Somebody else asked me about this today. So thoughtfully planned built environment really was intended to mean, you know, buildings in the public, so whether it's our planning projects or I think at the time, of course, the hotel and parking garage were part of that thinking, you know, things the city builds, are they meeting the look and feel of the community versus sustainable infrastructure, which had to do, are our roads going to last for a long time? Are they, you know, climate resilient? Are they? So it was sort of our own water and sewer pipes and our drains and those kinds of things. So they were intended to be separate things. They don't have to be, but they really weren't the same thing. And I think, at least at the time, I think maybe it was Councilmember Hill at the time, that really wanted the inclusive, equitable, and engaged community separated out. And that's ultimately what led to the Social Justice Committee and the master plan.
I know, I was around at that
Yeah,
time.
I know, but I was partly doing this
Yeah.
review for everyone else too.
But like the sustainable infrastructure, as Jack reminded me, we're talking about buildings as well as roads. And the buildings and the infrastructure is also our parks and our riverways, things that we want to do the right way. So that's why I would suggest those first two get moved over. The third maybe goes by itself, but that's just a suggestion. You can vote on it.
However you all want to do it.
So just to be clear, sorry, you're suggesting that thoughtfully planned built environment be a part of
Sustainable
infrastructure. Okay.
That like, then the broad sense of infrastructure, anything we build and maintain, parks.
So I guess, again, just to make sure we're clear, thoughtfully planned built environment also had to do with things the city didn't build, like private buildings
Right.
and our zoning and planning. So that's not the same as city buildings, infrastructure that we. So
Yeah,
if you want to lump those together, that's fine, but they were meant to be slightly different.
right, like I think of the thoughtfully planned built environment, the emphasis being on planned, which in my mind is about the planning department. You could also change that. I mean, that could be another goal. It's like,
Planning as something separate, like sustainable planning that fits our community, like that could be another goal entirely, right? So you were not wed to these
Yeah.
by any means. You know, we're doing ongoing work in these buckets, right? But the like, just as Bill's described in the iceberg, a lot of that work is not necessarily the things that are going to be aligning with your goals. They're just necessary work to complete our jobs, right? And so the things that we're trying to get you to think about here are these like larger goals. If the goal of thoughtfully planned built environment really sticks to with that planning, maybe the goal should be renamed or reimagined to fit things more like, you know, refining our planning processes, or a goal should be, you know, planning as a response to community need, or whatever floats your boat.
in this circumstance, you know? So, I'd love to, you know, if you have, other, just sort of rambling here, and, but if you had anything that you were going there with that, we're.
You know, that's fine.
I was just gonna say, the reason I combine them is I think the golds are like having a red thread and a purple thread and a blue thread. And that everything that comes after those will also have predominantly that goal in mind, whether it's the private owned building or the city building, that there's an assessment going on that's gonna have this one color thread of a gold going through it, even though it has many different departments or strategies. I just find having as many goals as we've had as to be not, I can't grasp them. It's like, I read the list every time and I say, really? So I'd like to simplify our goals so that we have this thread going through all the stuff that then becomes strategies.
Well,
That's just me.
That leads up to right to what I was gonna say, maybe, which is, as I look at this list now, thoughtfully planned built environment, I'm not sure exactly what it means, but the other thing I think is that rather than being, I'll go back and say that when we went through this the last time or the last couple of times, one of the elements of this was there are certain things that city departments and city staff are gonna do just because that's what they do, even if we don't say this is our priority. You know, we don't have to tell the fire department that your goal is to put out fires. Because
That's good.
because they do that.
That's the center of those concentric circles.
And when I think of thoughtfully planned built environment, you know, the planning department and the planning commission and all the departments are already engaged in working on producing the components that are going to go into the master plan. And so, and that is, you know, zoning ordinances, master plan, all that stuff is what we do to develop a thoughtfully planned built environment. So I'm suggesting maybe we don't need that to be one of our goals. That's just, that's more a core function of city government than a goal for the council.
So you think we need to get more specific
Um,
in terms of goals or?
Well,
just
no,
curious?
I'm just saying, strike that off the list, because if
Right.
we're gonna have certain, there's only so much attention that we have to go around.
And likely in the next year, you're gonna be dealing with the new master plan. city. That's gonna be on your table desk probably like February, maybe March, somewhere in there. So. You know, some of your work in the next year will be looking. at
Yeah. Without saying.
That's gonna happen whether you
It's
put it
the
on the
top
list.
level priority, yeah.
I think to like the extent this document is a communication to folks, it's important to set aside that like COVID-19 is still up here. Look around the room. We're all wearing masks. It's a worldwide pandemic. We had like $1 million cut from our budget. And there's nothing more personal than like a shot in the arm. So ensuring that everybody's, you know, safe and healthy during this worldwide pandemic, which has potential to go like past getting sick, but like, you know, break down supply chains, you know, find people out of work. It's kind of all encompassing. So I would just like kind of separate it from other stuff's like not necessarily business as usual, but just to communicate that to folks. It's
So that's a good point. We actually talked about whether it needed to be on there, not because it's obviously not still an issue. But last year at this time when we were doing this, we were talking about what can we do to prop up our businesses and all those kinds of things. And that was before we knew anything about PPPs and the loans and all these other things, you know, it was, so I think some of that's taken care of itself. I mean, you know, maybe the parking. So, you know, I think where it's really come down to us is how we manage the safety rules for employees and, you know, and we kind of let the state set the big policy. So, you know, the question is, do we need to spend, is that something, when we talk about that 3 weeks of council work, Is that
Right, what
something
would
we're gonna
the
spend a lot of,
strategies
obviously,
be?
we're gonna do this, but is that part of your 125 hours, to spend a lot of time on COVID-19 as a council? Or is that a public, an activity under public health and safety that we will be making good decisions about?
There's also the thing, a lot of what Bill and I talked about, the COVID-19 response, a lot of the things that are still ongoing under that, that we saw in your report on by the end of the year is the economic development side of that, right? How do we take advantage of those loans? How do we communicate those loans to our business owners? So to me, that made a lot of sense is some of this public health and safety part of it. Honestly, it comes down to y'all putting masks mandates into place, but the strategies for COVID-19 all right now are around economic development, right?
Which is what community prosperity used to be.
Right.
Is economic development. Those words changed. 3 years ago.
I guess just 2 thoughts on that. I mean, I do, so like we're pretty fortunate being able to say like through PPP and the expanded unemployment benefits and like some of that's drying up now. So, and the pandemic is not ending anytime soon as far as we know. So I think we're still going to have to be prioritizing and it might shift. Like I think the federal programs are going to be changing and different opportunities and different state opportunities. So I still think something in that vein. I mean, part of it to me would be like, how is Montpelier positioning itself to take advantage of the state COVID money? And so maybe COVID response could mean some different things this year than it meant last year, where it was really. And I also hope, maybe Connor talked about somebody talked about like how we're more disaster ready and like what are the lessons learned? Like, okay, we like had to stand up this response. We did, there was like the mutual aid groups and the this and that. Like, what have we learned and how are we capturing that so we're better prepared next time? Like, I hope that's part of what we're doing too. So to me, that would be like COVID readiness and learning. And so just somehow I think it still needs to be there, but I think it'll look different this year.
How do you feel about moving it into like a strategy under either public health and safety or community prosperity? Or would you rather it still remain out separate?
You could say it touches anything, right? It could fit almost under anything. Yeah, that's why I'm just thinking like don't take it out, but like almost highlight it,
I mean, I don't think there's any downside except in that we're forced to pick more.
I know.
Besides that,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it could be like a separate kind of lens almost that like things are happening through. It's like the context in which we're living.
Yeah, right. It's a lens too.
So I don't know. I just
Do you think we have is a goal that's not on there that ought to?
if I had a proposal, I could make it fit under one of those things. No matter what. I'd be telling you guys, this fits exactly with like sustainable infrastructure.
I mean, I agree with that, and I feel like the wording, like I think more housing is like maybe our most clear one. Like it's.
And actually, you only voted on housing. last year.
Right, we
just
added the more later.
Nice definition. But like to me, because I'm like environmental stewardship, like I mean to me would be like a clean, healthy environment. Like I'd rather make them things that mean something to people. Like the same way we're like we came up with these words. I was there when we came up with thoughtfully planned built environment. No one knows what the heck it means. So that's not great communication with the public. So I almost think like either it's just I think maybe we even had like whole sentences describing.
We do
what
have
meant by it.
sentences underneath
But like
each
in
one.
wanting them to be kind of short and sweet to like point to, but maybe like even staff thinking about are there better ways to describe them? Like
Right.
I work in the environmental field and like environmental stewardship, like I would just never say that phrase. Like I don't even know what that.
Well,
I
I'm
know
not
what
in
it
that
means.
field and I relate to it as a more relatable way of being careful of our resources and our energy and being green and access and all
Then
of
is it
that.
like a stormwater utility?
All
That's
of
kind of
that.
sustainable
Could be.
infrastructure too.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. To me, it's like
Just, yeah.
Well, and it's less about, at some point, it's get all the activities and what we put them under is, and it's good to guide us, but sure, you can split hairs, which one it goes under, but as long as it goes under. You know, I think that's that's where I was at with the verbs, it's sort of like, is it promote environmental stewardship, practice environmental stewardship, engage in, support, you know, it all, they're just words, but they do kind of shade how we then set our strategies. It's just,
So is there any terms that you would use about the environment that would satisfy?
Well, I'm just thinking like more descriptive, like clean, healthy water and clean energy, or like what are we actually doing under that?
So
Like,
those
let's
would be
just
your
say what it is
strategies.
instead of just like broad stewardship. But I mean, maybe like, I think that also might cover like our parks and
Yes.
stuff, like,
Yeah,
so,
we're almost ready to go to
you know,
strategies.
so, yeah, and I don't want to get into strategies, but I'm just.
No, but I think that's where you're
That's
headed,
where
so
you're
I
going.
think once we hit there, we're gonna have a mother load
Yeah,
of.
yeah,
ideas.
maybe when we see your strategies.
Mother
maybe
load.
Yeah.
I think almost for all of them, like.
So maybe we can do a straw poll.
So I thought we
Honestly.
were gonna list our three, no?
Well, we're
Not-
gonna do those after you get the strategies.
Okay,
Yeah.
Because
some of
people
those
are gonna
might-
wanna know what's
Maybe we
included.
could sort of
Sure.
categorize what we would rather.
So maybe I could get like a good idea of
thumbs
where
up,
you're at
thumbs
with
down.
these. Yeah, thumbs up and thumbs down on community prosperity. Okay, it's majority thumbs. COVID-19 response.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, am I only voting for three right
No,
now?
no, no, you're voting
Just,
for,
do they stay in or stay or
Oh,
do
go?
you like
Stay
them,
in.
do you not?
Yeah, they don't-
Okay,
They don't,
okay.
there's no limit right now.
Okay, all right, maybe I'll restart then. Community prosperity. All right, COVID-19 response. Okay. We're gonna question mark, I'm gonna put a question mark in COVID.
because we respond to everybody else when it comes to COVID-19.
Responsive and
Initiate.
responsible government. Okay, more housing,
Yes.
all right. Environmental stewardship, wordsmithing
Whatever that
aside.
means.
Sustainable infrastructure. Inclusive, equitable, and engaged community.
I put it over there.
Okay. Thoughtfully planned.
I don't know if we had. Were there, I didn't see all the thumbs. Where
No,
were
no,
they?
we're here.
Okay.
And I was about to write it down because we didn't get a lot of thumbs, so I'm gonna
Okay.
put it in the question column. Okay. I'm just gonna write the word inclusive. I'm gonna write all that.
Sorry.
Thoughtfully planned built environment. Oh, there are no thumbs.
Mike's gonna do it.
And public health and safety. Okay, so that puts a couple ones up for further conversation around. So when we're looking at our COVID-19 response, there was maybe some hesitation because we feel like it could fall in other places, and that's fair. You know, the way that we've been doing strategies around COVID-19, like Lauren says, there are grant readiness, after action learning and our coup plans, right? So now we have to, and our local hazard mitigation plan, right? Under public health and safety, that's where all of those things are being captured, like how we've done our after action, what lessons we've learned, how we're integrating this into our coup plans, which is continue. It's very late for me. I'm not gonna go into that. It's just a plan that we have for continuity of operations. See, I remembered. And then we also have that fitting in a couple different places as well. So maybe you don't need the COVID-19 one if you feel like it's accurately captured what you're looking for in your strategies in these goals.
I agree with that. I think that we're at this stage of the pandemic, we don't need to be setting policies at the council level for what we're gonna do. I think that we know what we're gonna do, but then we put a lot of reliance on the professionals and departments to make it happen and to do and to manage it well. That takes it out of the council board category.
That definitely, again, doesn't mean that we're not going to be responsive to any changes. This will immediately come to y'all for your awareness. It just might mean that some of the things that we have been putting money towards, like partitions and other things that aren't necessarily recommended anymore, that's not, maybe you're saying that's not quite your priority for spending. So Mostly because we've already spent that.
I mean, I'd like it like conveyed in this document that we're on top of COVID.
Yeah,
And
for
like,
sure.
I might be in the minority here. I don't trust the state always. I was proud when we came out before the state did with the mask mandate. I think they're wrong at making each school district do this by themselves, and it's a school district decision. But I think that we will be, assertive on our own here, not just rely on them.
Is there a way to?
But I think we'll
We
make
can put
those
a statement
decision under
in.
our public health and safety decision led by staff.
Should, but
I
like,
don't
okay,
think
when a
it's a
bunch of
separate
people are
goal.
laid off, what are we gonna do about COVID if it comes back again? I think it touches everything so much that it deserves to be almost separate from this. Because it's almost a different train of thought as far as thinking into the future and, roll with the punches with what COVID deals us next, because we don't know.
And I think that leads us to sort of our capacity and resources, like, obviously you could decide this, but in reality, we don't have the resources to sort of have our own unemployment program or rent subsidy program. Those kind of, much as we think they would be great, it sort of goes back to where's our mission, what's our capacity, so how do we support these other programs and what can we do? I think we ran into that last year, where we all were like, oh, we want to help all these businesses, and then we don't, where are we getting millions of dollars?
But we did through the parklets, we supported them in those
Right,
ways,
but those-
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think those are the kind of, what I could envision, Connor, just to try to help you out here, is we develop our strategic plan, and maybe in the introductory statement, we'd say, we acknowledge that we are operating under, in this pandemic era, and that everything we do is colored by COVID-19.
Mhm.
Just sort of put it up front.
That
as a
satisfies my
statement,
concerns,
and
And that's how I sort of feel about community prosperity, is I feel like we touch it on all these other things. And that
so.
we don't have the staff or money to make, we're not an economic development.
Right, well, and I think, but that's a question, at one point that was a high priority, and it was, like I said, it was economic development activities. And then I think it got broadened to be, well, should be all prosperity for all people, which is fine, and how does that look? But at once upon a time, that was sort of the economic development and, how much are we gonna increase the tax, what's our budget frugality? goal?
Right.
And it's because that keeps us more affordable. So,
Yep.
So I think, but again, it's up to you how you wanna,
But that's why I
Keep
didn't
it-
vote for it. And
Okay.
that's why, or the COVA, I think they're integrated elsewhere.
and then you can decide if you want to change names of it too.
Well, let me ask a question about that, because whether we call it community prosperity or economic development, we know that, for instance, the city worked really hard and spent a lot of time working with Caledonia Spirits to get them here, and the city council voted to devote capital resources to making that happen. I don't know what the next thing like that is gonna be, but I think that the city should be doing that kind of thing, whether it's something that needs council level policy. This is another question.
Well, so I would
What do
say,
you think about
yes,
that?
that is definitely, because when we come to do the budget, whether, obviously, we used to have a private nonprofit that did that now. We don't, so we've got to figure out how to go forward. That money's in abeyance right now because of COVID, but go forward, if that's a priority or a goal, then how are we going to implement that? Or is it something, again, it tells us if that's not a top thing that the council wants to do, then we may just say, hey, go see the planning department, you're on your own, or hey, we, the city, will step up to really help because that's something that's important. So, we're allocating limited resources too.
Bar Hill came to us, Caledonia Spirits came to us, and then, ultimately, they really did look at the flavor of Montpelier, and then Jamie put a lot of time, Jesse put a lot of time on that as assistant city manager, and that we decided to let her do that, dedicate that time, but we weren't having a staff focused on doing just that. I think
No.
definitely your ears are
but it was
open, but I think that's different than if
But actually,
if
we
we
reached
become
out
our
to
own
them.
economic development council, then we need to then look at staff. Are we going to dedicate a
right,
staff to that?
right.
So
Maybe.
I'm saying it's
That's-
indirect, that if we do our due diligence as a government in a city, people will want to come here. And then we can look at each situation as they come up and say, now we'll dedicate more extra time for this. I guess, how I feel about it versus setting time aside now.
So we can get to that with the strategies. I mean, right now, I think it's in, right? There were everyone else voted for it, right? For communities park,
I don't know if Jay voted and I didn't see his thumb.
I just don't know what the,
These are the only ones that didn't have a majority.
Okay.
so the question is, do we keep the wording or?
So maybe we focus on these three again
Yeah.
for right now. So, you know, we talked about this. You came up with a lot of really great strategies and actions that can be put maybe under some other positions, unless you want to keep this one. Like grant readiness, making sure that we're being leaders and assertive with, and don't worry about wordsmithing these things, making sure that we've got our after action plans, we're tracking mandates, we're being proactive with mandates, et cetera. Supporting businesses with things like parklet programs. So, and then I will also add our local hazard mitigation plan, which does talk about infectious diseases. So there's a few things there that you've talked about as strategies and actions that can fit under a whole host of things, or still COVID-19 response, depending on how y'all feel.
I like
So-
Bill's idea though, too. I think that could be encompassed in a statement to kick this off.
Okay. COVID.
So otherwise it would be under the public health and safety.
It'll show
Some
up in
of them
different
will
places.
be and some of them won't. So
Okay,
like,
but I mean, they'll be
The
under the.
specific activities
yeah.
will show up where they belong.
so things like grant readiness could be under community prosperity. And these could be under public safety. The parklets and other supporting of small businesses could also be under community prosperity. So there's a whole different host of places that y'all want to keep that those things could find a home. No problem. So COVID-19 as goal, thumbs up or down?
Well,
it's
included as a preamble.
As-
Right,
as
without,
discussed.
without, like, just as a goal, not as a preamble or anything, but if you want to include it as a goal, still thumbs up or down. All right, so that one is gone. And it's gonna integrate itself into other places. So that's doing a good job.
All right, we're narrowing it down.
So inclusive, equitable, and engaged community. We haven't really touched on that one a lot. And I will say that under, because it was in department work plans only. I think this one really stuck. Most of the work was under my work plan and the city manager's office work plan about work with the Social and Economic Justice Advisory Committee and creative discourse. That's really what a lot of this one came down to. There were some, you know, we could talk about, there's other things that could go under that, like our homelessness response, but that could also go under public health and safety. So there's a whole lot of other things that could go there or could find other homes.
And that work could go under responsive and responsible government.
Right, exactly. Because right now, we've gotten our equity report and now it's time for us as staff to integrate that into everything that we do, right? We've got recommendations. How do we start pulling those recommendations and putting them into action and not just a report, right? So,
Well, that's probably still, at this stage, we've got recommendations. We have not, as a council, said, yes, out of these 10 recommendations, we agree with 6, we kind of agree with 2, and we don't agree with 2. We haven't done that.
That's true.
That seems like that's part of it.
As a
And that could be a-
responsible, responsive government.
Like, so just looking, I just pulled up the equity report, kind of the consultant recommendations. I mean, a lot of it really is, I think for like the next phase is looking at the accessibility of city government. So that's like language access. I mean, it's a lot of like physical access. It's looking into things like stipends, which, you know, we've talked about before, to make it more accessible for people to serve. So, I mean, maybe if we add accessible, responsible government, is at least getting at that, I think. And then the other suite of recommendations were law enforcement related, which clearly go under public health and safety, and maybe there's some, you know, we had some like verbiage in the vision that maybe part of our goal. So like maybe it's a verb or something that is getting at like how we're delivering our public health and safety services and responsive to.
Yeah, we had a good phrase for public safety services.
What if, I like this idea of like adding a word to the like responsive and responsible government. Doesn't start with the letter R, but I mean, accessible is one, but I also kind of, I'm wondering about the word equitable, because I feel like it's a little broader, but it would include accessible. Happy to be wrong about that, but there's my. And because I feel like that's an important sentiment, it's almost like a value, more than a city goal exactly.
Well, maybe it'll show up in our.
Yeah.
in our mission.
Right, like like that's, I feel like it's important to capture that sentiment. I feel like if we can include that word in responsible and responsive government, maybe add the word equitable, or even if we just say like, it's a part of it, or if it's built into the vision, it just needs to be somewhere.
I think you're right that if you do all of these other goals to accomplish your vision, you will inevitably have an inclusive and equitable community. I think the engaged part, what Lauren was saying, was really important, and making sure that's captured maybe under the responsible government, if that's what y'all are thinking. I wrote down some of your actions and strategies that are coming out of this conversation as well. So that's a thought.
I think the engaged piece is really important. I just don't want to lose sight of that because my concern is, and I don't want to be like wordsmithing here, like we're certainly getting into that, but you know, with responsive is just passive. And what we want to do is be proactive and engage our community.
So I would say responsible and engaged government.
I like that. Yeah, I just want to, I feel like we need to own that. The onus is on us to engage in an equitable way, of course, because, but that's very fair. Like I think that's one of our challenges with our communications is, we rely on too many channels that aren't equitable. And I have thoughts about how we can fix that, but that's, the next set of pieces of paper. So, but I do think that that having that, and coming back to Bill's notion of verbs, like this is where we need to be when we're setting our goals, from my perspective. So I like Bill's idea
Of sort of we're talking about getting rid of this one and changing it to responsible and engaged government.
Sounds good.
With that statement in mind, so the thumbs up and down to that, thumbs up to scrapping this verbiage and changing this verbiage and sort of moving the things into this space.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderbar. So now we're down to thoughtfully planned built environment, which again, I do think a lot of that is very planning heavy.
It's my.
It is that was
just put
basically
Mike as a
Mike's
goal.
department.
Just put it out.
No, it's
like,
using
yeah,
our
I
staff. We're using our staff well. Let's just.
The thing that gets me about that one is like, the thoughtfully doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? Like, that could mean anything. But
No, I'm with you.
Well, thoughtfully was supposed to be, you had a standard.
Well, it didn't get a majority when you first went.
No, it didn't.
Scrap it.
It seems like it's still
Gone.
doesn't.
Oh, all right, well. I mean, certainly, like you said, a lot of what Mike's group does and his team does is involved in almost everything, because planning is a central core of one of our core functions, right? That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, is there any reason to have something around planning? Like, is our work going to be involved in planning? Very
Well, it will
much?
be, but
Sure,
it still, it could be under some of these other things. I think, if you really don't have something like planning, it would kind of go back to when we talked about the vision or the mission of growing, if you
Yeah.
really want to set a goal of it's the city council's goal is to plan for a growing city. That's different than thoughtfully planned. That's, this is something we want to see. And so now we're going to make policies and things that address.
I mean,
That's a different kind of state.
the thoughtfully planned and built environment and I guess in my head, it is, it does come back to these other things. Like if it's planned, built environment that's about development, then that's really community prosperity. If it's thoughtful because it is considering environmental concerns, that's environmental stewardship. If it's thoughtful because it's, because we're just trying to build more housing, then it's more housing, like it's all the ways that I can think of thoughtfully planned built environment playing out. I think it could fit elsewhere under multiple things.
Where it's thoughtful because we want a built environment, but we don't want it to look like those acres of identical houses.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right.
Unless,
So we dropped
Done.
Yeah, this
goals.
feels
Yeah, okay,
good.
so-
So,
three,
It's
and
gone.
reworded one.
yeah, so that looks really good. And so, sort of what the next part of that was to take the strategies from those goals. So what I would like us to do is just take maybe 5 minutes so I can write these things in a legible way so that we can look at what this actually means for what your goals are right now. So if you don't mind,
we're taking a break.
small
Take
break for me to
Just
just
5 minutes.
write things so we're not just all staring at me while I write things. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sure.
So
Seems fair.
what some strategies that you may have for some of these goals would be. So like, again, we talked about like encouraging new businesses and build infrastructure. That is a strategy to accomplish community prosperity. You talked about maybe economic development staff member. That could be a strategy also to go back to community prosperity. We talked about creative discourses, equity recommendations. That could fit into a responsible, engaged community, right? So these are all strategies and actions that y'all have been thinking about and brainstorming already. So strategies are generalities on how to support your goals that you just came up with, right? There is one of our things that we sort of reworked that I use as an example is how do we maintain clear communication, right? What are our strategies to make sure that we have clear communication? If that is a strategy that y'all want to look at, it's up to us then as staff to tell you, here's to recommend to you, here's how we would do that. Do you like this plan? Yes, no.
And also, if you have suggestions. we
Yeah, of
can write
course.
them down.
This is going to be a collaborative process. You remember last year, we brought to you a bunch of initiatives and plans. This is us asking you to help us prioritize what you want before we enter our budget process, before we start figuring out what the next year's planning will be and what will look like. So we're going to take your recommended strategies and propose initiatives and actions. I'm sorry. Propose initiatives and actions to help implement those strategies. So, and you weren't here. I did have COVID. I don't have COVID. I am still in long-term recovery. So what I really like us to do is spend some time really thinking about each one of these and do as many sort of like what strategies. This is a time to, if you have a project or something that you'd really like to see within this plan, now would be the time to talk about it, right? Our planning director, I want to call it Mike, really talked to us about, who just left, of course. We talked about making sure strategies evoke one of these three things. What do you want to do with this goal? Do you want to maintain what we have currently? Do you want to evolve and move forward what we do currently? Or do you want to transform it entirely, right? So those are good things to keep in mind when you're brainstorming your strategies to accomplish these goals. So again, this is something that staff is able to help with if this is, we're coming up blank, but I know not one of you is going to come up blank for things you want to see done to accomplish these goals, right?
This is your wheelhouse, right?
Yeah. So this is what we want to hear. We want to hear ideas on how you would like to see us move forward community prosperity. So with that in mind, number one, what kind of strategies do you see? I mean, you've definitely already started on some of those, so I'll write them
And do you
down.
want, like, is this a maintenance, an evolution, or a transformation?
Staff member for economic development, that might be a strategy.
And using one of those verbs, does it need to be in relationship to the other goals?
No, it would be,
Just this
Okay.
one.
it
No,
would
no,
be, it would be with regard to this goal. So,
just this, okay.
let's pick a different one.
No, I got it. That's-
Sustainable infrastructure. We just want to keep doing what we're doing. Do we want to just evolve it more, or are we gonna tear the thing down and do something completely cool?
So, go ahead.
Oh,
Not all of your
I
goals
have
have
a
to fit into
question
that.
first.
Okay.
No, so like,
No.
if you say, this is new, right? This is transformative. We don't have an economic development staff member. Not every strategy that you have for community prosperity has to be transformative.
Right.
These are just suggestion words to think about.
So I wonder if, like, so Donna said one thing at the beginning, like, I'd like to see the city be more involved in like social services, right?
Mhm.
I think like a statement like that warrants a conversation before we get into this, right? And I think I'm on the homelessness task force, my sins. And, I don't think we're necessarily getting clear direction from the homelessness task force, which we need to do, which we said today. If you give us proposals, we need a budget, we need to know like who's providing the services. We need to know where it is. We need to know like, how is it going to happen here? Or it's going to be tough for us to make a decision. But I also think we need to give them some direction too, because the things on the table are everywhere from, we need another garden park out there. It's just going to cost like 5 or 10K to, Norwich had a pretty good presentation on a $2.5 million warming shelter. So like, I think we owe them to say, okay, what level of social services are we gonna provide? Are we gonna throw some hotel vouchers on there? Are we gonna like work with community partners to have like staffing around the clock 24/7 to make up for homeless shelters? It's like a big conversation, and I feel like it's hard to like come up with actual examples of that until we have a collective conversation like that. What does like providing more social services like look like, right? There might be a whole council meeting that would like warrant that, but
Well, like I said at the beginning, don't fight every battle. This might be one is set a goal or a strategy to determine the level of human services involvement the council, the city wants to take them on and set that for a future. That could, like you said, that could be a whole meeting.
right. I'd like to do that.
I'm gonna put a number 2 next to that for the maybe responsible and engaged
Mhm.
government community. I don't know if that, unless you want it to go under community prosperity.
I put it on the share show, but I would think we just take one goal and take strategies for that. But
Right, I just don't want that to go away.
Okay, yeah, I know. Well, that would that be under community prosperity? Whatever.
Yep.
Go.
Fine.
Too many cooks.
Determine level of social services.
Well, just on that point, so, I mean, I think that would be a really good, like, bigger picture discussion to have, and I don't think that we have clarity amongst ourselves around that. I do, just wanted to note that, for example, I know, like, the report we're getting soon from the police review committee, we have 2 recommendations about increasing staffing for peer support workers, for mental health peer support work, and street outreach peer support work. So that's examples of more social services that that group is going to be recommending to be investment. It's like starting to move in that direction in line with the vision, but it's not like how far are we looking to go with this, which I think would be a good like bigger picture. But just noting, I think there's going to be some of those ideas coming out either later tonight or are part of the like.
So that's it. The whole thing about social services, human services, I mean, that is really a class, that is a great policy discussion, because do you want to maintain kind of the low to non-level that we're doing now? Do you want to evolve it to something a little more, or do you say, this is transformative, we're going to suddenly create resources and capacity to, deliver human services on some level in it?
Right, we need to be on, oh, sorry. Like, we just need to be honest, I think, like, if we say, okay, this is the state's responsibility, we should have no role in it, we should just say it, I'm not saying that is the way to go, but I think that's the kind of stuff we need to get done and dusted.
So at the risk of being another cook in the kitchen, I don't know, do you all have lists of like things, of ideas? Okay, because I do. And I'm worried about like, I have 17 things on my list. And that some of them are like more detail, they're more action level than this. And
Well, to be perfectly honest with
Yeah.
you, the way I anticipated this part of this going is that we just start yelling out stuff y'all want to do. And then staff can come back and look at where do we think this fits into the protocols that we already have, and the work that we already have going? What goal does that fall under?
That's kind of what I was hoping for, is I kind of just want to like spit out my whole list.
I want to hear the whole list.
Then we can go back and say maintain, evolve, transform, not now.
And like figure out, okay, this one goes under community prosperity, but this one goes under public health and safety. And
Fine, just.
do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
All right.
is that, I mean, I realize that is less organized. in a
I get,
way,
that's
but-
fine. I guess, and then I guess the.
There's a lot of gray
Yeah.
area, So I think if we worry about the semantics.
Right.
let's get
So
the
far
ideas.
away,
So,
Mayor, go for it.
I mean, I apologize for cutting off the conversation about specifically community prosperity, because that might be fruitful in itself. Okay, well, I'm gonna say a whole bunch of things. Is that
Go
okay?
for it.
And recognizing that, we're gonna talk about them. Everyone may not agree, and that's okay. Okay. Explore conservation efforts around Berlin Pond. Establish an infant or 0 through 5-year-old childcare program.
Vested interest here.
Yeah. I don't know. To be fair, I said exactly the same thing
I know
a
you
year
did.
ago.
I know you did.
I know fair.
You were
But
planning.
knowing you were planning.
Thoughtfully planned.
Okay, we've kind of said this, but figure out our economic development strategy, whether that's a person, an employee, or an outside entity. Is that outsourced to Montpelier Live? Is that internal? We just need to have that conversation. I would like to, this is more around budget stuff, but either plan to bond for net zero plan implementation or merely start with engineering studies. Consider funding options, like potentially bonding around Confluence Park and the possibility of dam removals. We have to do this anyway, so this probably doesn't rise to the level of, like, we gotta figure out what to do with the remaining $50,000 that we set aside. We can skip it. Okay. We're gonna, we need to consider stormwater utility. That's, maybe that was already gonna happen anyway. Explore all ages childcare from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. to match parent work hours. Need to follow up on the home energy information ordinance. Consider bonding or revisioning the plan for the rec building. There needs to be website improvement. I'd like to see increased coordination. I'm sorry, nope. Increased coordination with the CAN network. I'd like us to consider our role in the future of 5 Home Farm Way. Oh yeah, also, apparently I had some duplicative ones in here, so it's not 17, that's great. I don't have anything more specific in this, but I'm calling it, it should not be called this. The housing task, I'd like to consider, I was gonna call it the poly-nickel housing initiative plan, but it's not poly-nickels, it's the housing task force. So, I'd like to explore options from the housing task force plan.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's not the poly-nickel. Okay, done. Thank you for listening.
And so, you know, I really see this as an opportunity to hear these things, and for staff, a lot of these things staff has been considering, so,
Yeah.
or working on something akin to this. And so hearing that these are the things that you want to see in your plan allows us to have a more robust plan to give back to you for feedback and prioritization, right?
And then you'll assign them to different goals. Right, and I think somehow we've got to figure out, well, maybe it'll just be when the draft comes back, but a process by which we decide if everyone's on board with all of this.
Right.
So last year we did a really good, like, I think Zoom allowed us to do a really good voting system for that we'll probably put back in place. So that's the next step for us to figure out. So,
I have a couple.
yeah.
So, excuse me. At BIPOC Community Center, a lot of us don't have anywhere to gather for ceremonies or other things, and it's lovely that the churches in town will offer spaces, but for some of us, we don't have a good relationship historically. And just having a space that could be usable for many different cultural events We know what we need. And it's lacking. I know, never mind, that's another thing. And then, I work for the Family Center of Washington County, and I'm a homeless family advocate, so having more, I don't want to say affordable, because that can mean a lot of different things to different people, but sustainable housing for folks that have experienced homelessness or are precariously housed. We can throw money and all kinds of, vouchers, but if people don't have the systems in place to help support them through that process and keeping them on a good path, they're not going to stay housed for very long.
So is this really housing support services? Not housing?
Probably.
But I have housing, so we have a place to support those services on my list.
Or you did that?
Some more. Okay, Anne hit on a bunch of my net zero, money, stormwater utility fund, acting on the police review committee recommendations, acting on our equity plan recommendations, and continuing the next phase of work. I think better roads, prioritizing our roads, and keep beating the drum, but like all our infrastructure is climate ready. I don't know exactly what this looks like, but being ready to take as much advantage of federal and state money as possible. Maybe this is the year we spend some of our $700,000 lobbying contract to have some of the appropriation. Like to me, I suppose having the resources to like be in the room and advocating for ourselves to get money and being having the plans and the structure in place that we can act on it and the timelines that we need to. So I know it's hard to like turn on a dime and be like, let's do this big infrastructure project we weren't planning on. So I think hopefully like thinking as creatively as possible about like what we can front load. Restroom facilities. Homelessness, like kind of saying, like having a more better plan and acting on it. I think like touching on what you were talking about. Outdoor rec. This plan in place. Towards this vision. Wow, that was a lot. Do you have more? Nothing that needs to. Big picture.
I guess I'll just add to a few things only because, it's a lot of pieces of paper. Going on. But maybe I'll add a little more detail to some of my thinking of what we're talking, things that have been brought up. Around communication, I think what we need to do is create channels and methods of communication that are equitable and accessible and owned by us, that complement other channels of communication. That's about how we can do that, but I think that relying on too many external platforms to get our message out doesn't necessarily meet that responsible and engaged community goal that we have. Anne mentioned, bonding for Confluence Park, but I would sort of broaden that a fair amount to say that we should prioritize the space both near and in our rivers for economic development and environmental stewardship reasons. I think a lot of that relies on a relationship with the state and the land that they own in the city, and what are their long-term plans and how is it used and how much of it is paved. It's tied into stormwater. It gets really nuanced pretty quickly, but I do think that that's like a broader picture that we should approach. Studying the removal or being involved in this, in researching the potential and what it would mean to remove the Bailey Street Dam is a perfect example where there's contaminated soils upstream from that. It's not really serving a purpose, but but these things take a lot of time. So starting these first steps, I think, even beyond the Confluence Park in our conversations, I think now is important to get those pieces moving. Cameron, that's not a bullet point at all. I'm so sorry.
Those are two under bullet points.
Under bullet points.
Yeah.
But I do think like having that broader perspective is really important, and thinking about the relationship, that we have with the rivers and the contaminated soils that are in those rivers. I think that's really important. To echo what Lauren said, I look at grant readiness relative to COVID, but I think it's like that ship has sailed relative to COVID. I mean, unemployment's done. It ended last week. I mean, will there be more? Who knows? But what may be coming, hopefully will be coming, is this infrastructure bill, and that is in a couple different phases. And I think being prepared, like you said, and ready to engage in that process, I think is really important. And I do think turning it around a little bit to be a little more specific, I do think it came up at our last meeting, but prioritizing with DPW, not just saying like the roads need to be better, but I think it's really important from the engagement perspective and public health and safety and all these things that we hopefully can task DPW to create a long-term plan so that we're not just playing whack-a-mole over and over again. And I know I'm talking about the roads. I understand that what's under the roads is a whole different thing, but how can we look at paving and having a plan and really communicating that to people so that it's not just a constant, it's never, there's the sense that it's just never going to get better. And if we have a plan and budget appropriately for it, that it would go a long way. And I think that goes hand in hand with potentially could be other infrastructure grant funds that could come through this federal money, et cetera. So, and I'll just add like a check mark to supporting what Alec and what Dan at Montpelier Live are doing around supporting the recreation economy in our city as an economic driver, because I think that we are, like I said before, uniquely situated here because we have such a strong downtown. We may not have a ski mountain out our back door, but we have a great downtown that people can come back to at night, and that's a real selling point. And I think a lot of businesses are seeing that as a reality. So supporting that effort as well. So not quite 17, but I tried.
Well, mine was 7.
I can rattle a few off, John. I think rather than like specific staffer for economic development, consider a range of options for it. Like, okay, here's 3 ways you can go. That'd be a pretty good discussion to have, one of which could be a staffer, but I think there's a number of ways we can do that. And as part of that, I think we really need to look to aggressively, this be a separate bullet, attract a couple more anchor businesses in town here. Like losing Nicky is a blow, and we have ideas. It's like, wouldn't it be great if we could bring Vermont Law School here? They were just looking at Burlington, but then I don't think we have anybody to like follow through at this point and like have those discussions. So having that kind of discussions, incentivize businesses to come that benefit working families. I hate that people have to go to Walmart or something to buy a pair of shoes for their kids. Like, I don't know how you actually put that, but to get businesses in town. I don't know how to write it, how we're gonna do it. So that's a couple economic development ones. Looking at vacancies in town, I don't know what they look like right now, as far as an average, city center, but looking for ways we can fill up storefronts, I think. And, I think I would have floated vacancy tax before. That might be too extreme, with COVID going on, but things like that. How do we fill up I know it's a third rail, right? That's okay. It's a time to be provocative. We need to take a closer look at micro transit, I think, and how it's functioning. I think the concept is fantastic that, we can pick up folks who have accessibility issues up a Town Hill Road and bring them right to their doctor's appointment. But right now, you go on the app and it's 2 hours wait and people aren't using it. So why aren't they using it? What can we do to pressure AOT and other departments to give the resources or give resources ourselves to make sure that's a successful program? Because it's huge, I think looking at staffing levels in every department, some of this probably goes, we're gonna have bad outcomes unless we have a full police force here. That's how bad stuff happens. And forget coffee with a cop and interacting and developing a beat and a rapport with people. I think we're probably at a bad place with staffing levels there. Similar with DPW, I think what Jay saying, we could throw all the money in the world and say fix the roads, but if we don't have the people to do it, that's a problem in itself. So staffing levels up and down there. And let's throw in a fun one just to finish. I dropped the ball on this a few years ago, but I think we should have a sister city that gives us a cultural exchange with an international city for our kids. We could have a big event, let's do something fun.
Only if it's a city that has scooters.
Listen, I wrote down scooters and deleted it, but I don't think it's going away forever. I'm bringing it back at some point. Yeah.
Actually, now we got jerseys from Montpelier.
I've lived and worked in a scooter project city, and it is a nightmare.
I lived in one for a month, and it was the best thing that ever happened.
They end up in rivers. They end up in trees. There's snow here.
You know the history of scooters here?
I don't even know if I want to get into the history of scooters here.
Okay, we're supposed to.
Yep.
It was the best thing that ever happened to this town.
You don't have to agree with everything that's said.
It's down.
We're brainstorming.
I wrote down scooters.
Put scooters
now.
down.
You get to vote later. Don't worry.
I'm gonna be looking at who doesn't put it down.
Are you done? Are you ending with scooters?
I'm gonna end with scooters.
Okay. I really think it's important that when I talked about partners for holistically human services with multi-ages and needs, I'm really thinking about having somebody who can sit at the table to offer a token financial carrot and staffing. So we have somebody around the table with all these regional groups that have so far not gotten us anywhere with any what I call temporary housing. And that I really feel we need a temporary housing facility and with services that's a real regional partnership with all the community cities and the nonprofits and the state. But we can't have it, I don't feel, unless we have the right person at the table. And I don't expect our committees to do that. I think we really need a professional there who knows what they can offer and be credible at the table. So that's how I was approaching that, as multi-services and not just temporary housing, but from there lead into other things like childcare, senior centers, just all sorts of stuff once we have a presence there. But I think much as I resisted us being a social service provider, that we ultimately will have to put our staffing and our money there to make it happen. I think there's a real shift that in order for us to do that in a holistic way and a regional way, so we're not carrying the full load. So from that, then I think we really need to also go into the public safety regionally and really commit to being a partner there. And I think there's a lot happening that's already there, but I'd like to see that stronger. I definitely want to see restrooms. God, do I want to see restrooms. And along with that, we backpacked when my kids were young, 6 months in Europe, and you could pay $10 to take a shower. Bathrooms, they were all over the place. And so it just seems that we could do something not only with the public restroom for toilets, but have 1 or 2 showers there. I think that we've underutilized the transit system, and I'm afraid that because of the pandemic, we won't ever see what it could be. The outside space alone by the shared use path could be really utilized. So that takes me to the Confluence Park. I want us to really be more active in that partnership, definitely remove dams. Bruton Park should be moved, it should be moved, it should be moved. And that we really also, by the same token, I feel we've backed off our citywide commitment to get parks throughout the whole town, that means across the river. And when I say city parks, I'm especially thinking of parents with young kids and seniors, so they have a place to sit, but also a toddler can have simple places to play, whether that's just sand, things to climb on. It can be very minimal and be very, very helpful. And so along with that, not only do I want parks everywhere, but I want to pick up what the Parks Commission and Alex wants to do, is making the parks a destination. That the city definitely needs to redo that website. I just want to shake it every time I go on it. And I can't imagine how any residents find anything, because I certainly can't. And that with that we really become serious about marketing our parks. I mean, we've gone way, I think, just advanced so much with more trails connecting, the fat bikes. The fat bikes have really been successful, and that we need to really market it. By the same token, sorry, Alex, we still don't have the signage that we need. And so I don't think people yet get that the North Branch is really a conservation path. That's why we ask dogs to be on a leash that aren't, because we don't want the wildlife disturbed. And if dogs are on a leash and people stay on the path, believe it or not, the wildlife adapts and doesn't leave. So I'd really, really like to see us to get back to that mission. The other thing is community events, the multi-age community events. I love Earth Day. I love the Halloween. I forget what it's called. Help volunteer there, and that's the most multi-age anything I've seen. But I'd like to see things that are not just kid-based, but they're really multi-age based, which means they have to be accessible to people who can't walk a long ways or stand on their own, and all that kind of physical as well as mental endurance. That there's a way to make things more short-term that both kids' temperament and the senior temperament could get through. Let's see what else I have here. Yeah, I just have to say one word. DPW has made all sorts of plans for the roads, and life happens. They've never been able to do it. And if it's not the money disappearing, it's Mother Nature knocking us off our block. So I think that indeed we can do another plan, and they are working on it. And that's one thing that I think has been unfortunate, is that the capital improvement plan committee hasn't met. And the first time that most of this council has really seen about pavement and the index was the previous meeting council that they did a presentation on. But that committee sat there and made road priorities. But then you'd have a break. Then you'd have this freeze thaw, the highways crumbling. The technology is so limited. And it's like, you know, we got pavement and everybody sort of then backed off and kept not improving the technology. So it's so frail. I mean, it's amazing. All this traffic, we just assume this pavement, but it's not durable. It's just not. And so I think we have to accept that. And I think Zach really was trying to get that across in the 5-year life of a road. Can you imagine that? Millions of dollars, 5-year life. But that's the reality. So I just feel like we need to educate ourselves and our community so much better about things like that. And keep offering it again and again, that the presentations they do at council, do it elsewhere, whether it's about the roads or whether it's about all of our business. When we really see that there's a lot of, I'm going to call cross the fence gossiping and need some real facts, we should offer a community meeting. People may not come, but we offer it. Gee, we've seen this discussed. We want to talk to you about what we feel is our reality of what happened, or our reality of what's going on. And I think the more we can do that as a council and our departments, the more we will engage. And we'll never do enough, no matter how much. But I would feel better if we really started looking at the more controversial things and just meet it head on and say, here we are. I can remember Tom, DPW, he'd come to these hearings on neighborhoods, yelling at him and be so calm and just due diligence. And I know all the department heads do that, but I just remember Northfield Street. It's like, whoa, Harrison Ave, whoa, Saturday morning, 9 a.m. And we just have to take that on more aggressively, I feel, that we just show up, whoever comes here, but we're offering ourselves to talk about these things if people really want to know. So anyway, that's all.
All right.
What do you got left, Jeff?
Well, I've got a few things. Evaluate the tax stabilization program and figure out if it's meeting our goals, and if it's not, what else we could do to attract businesses to the city. With housing, one of the things that we talked about was that, for one thing, the housing task force at our last meeting did spend some time talking about, well, what are the few things that we could be asking the city for, and we're going to be hearing from them. Not sure exactly when, but we have another meeting coming up. Third Thursday of the month. But consider having someone, the way economic development departments to have someone to affirmatively work with and recruit and try to get housing developers to build. So affirmative outreach for housing development is a short way to put it. If we want to get more housing, we need to preserve the housing we have now. That so I would say consider regulating short-term rentals. There's a tremendous impact, negative impact on the rental housing stuff from the short-term rental industry. Possibly couple that with a proposal that I saw to encourage us to work on some kind of short-term rental development. If people,
Can you say that one more time for me?
short-term rental development.
Okay,
like
thank you.
Getting Airbnb not to put it in people's houses, but build an Airbnb building somewhere. Obviously, we're not, the city's not going to build it. I heard about recruiting people to serve on city committees and boards. My former daughter-in-law many years ago was invited to this effort that the city they were living in was doing, where the city would get all the nonprofits and city boards and committees that are looking for members and do outreach to employers, to other community groups, to say, come talk to us. We're going to have a town committee fair or something. So come and let us make a pitch to you about what you could do if you were on any one of these 28 city boards, so that we don't just put the notice up and nobody signs up, or the only people that sign up are the people that are already on, who are mostly really good, but also might want to have a break, and some of those people might be thinking, well, I have to keep signing up because nobody else is going to invite on. If we're going to develop more parks, make sure that we are maintaining sufficient staff resources to service the parks that we're going to have. maintain the funding for the housing trust fund. That might be it for now.
Just love it, all things.
Well, there's certainly no shortage of things.
Amazing.
So. That's you. So we're definitely not going to get to a point of voting tonight. That's not happening. But what we did last time, and I think this is helpful as I sort of drew the chart out, is we came up with your goal and then we wrote down all of the strategies. Some of them may be staff supported and some of them may be council, like coming out of this list that you had, right? And then what we could do is a straw poll vote, and then I could bring this to you instead of a fully fleshed out plan to look at. So this would be the first step. So we would see what has the majority of council support to include in the plan, right? So you had like, let's say a bunch of things about economic development. There might be like 15 rows here, right? But the ones that should be included in your council strategic plan, which again, doesn't mean that they're not going to get done, but the ones that have the majority of the council voting for them, right, would be included in your strategic plan. So
And you're still giving us a limited number of votes to help us prioritize.
yes, I would need to come up with the exact number, but yes.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yes.
You'll have the dots next time.
Yes,
Well,
I think they would
We
be
have the dots
digital,
with us, but we didn't expect, I don't think quite this many.
which is good. This is fine. So, right, so the dots may be a digital straw poll where we do it independently. You send it to me and then we bring it to council and talk about it publicly and do the formal voting.
Yeah,
And
let's
so,
do that.
so this, yeah, we'll have to come up with the plan, but I hadn't planned on coming back to y'all until October with a fully fleshed out thing. But to me, there's definitely room for another step in between that, where y'all could hear feedback about these ideas. We can make them public, obviously, with the agenda, and then we could make formal votes on their inclusion. So I think,
We can think of a process.
yeah, of course.
So under the category that you have their strategies, when it says council versus staff, is that like council, like these were council generated versus these were staff generated? Is
Right,
that?
but
Yeah.
they'd also be on the same list, so
Right.
that you can,
Okay.
there may be stuff or actions that,
Okay,
because some of these are strategies, some of these are actions.
Right.
Some of these are,
Right.
you know, so we've got to layer all this into the way that it makes the most sense.
yeah,
And then put in the stuff that we know are in these other plans that we've already talked about, see where there's duplication. And I guess the only question I have really is there anything, you know, right now, this is just assuming that everybody's idea is, everyone else is fully on
Right.
board with, and I don't know how we.
Well, that comes down
I
to.
guess that'll come down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
To try to
further question. I kind of assume that there are some things that, maybe this is a bad assumption, but that there may be some things that we kind of either have to do.
Right, and we'll sort those.
And so I just hope that when we get to voting, that we don't have to vote on those,
Right.
right? That
No,
those
that's
should be separate because like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's.
you
right.
know, don't want to waste a vote.
But I would like us to come back together live after that initial vote.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we did last time, and I really missed that for any sort of final selection.
Oh, yeah, we definitely had to do all of it over Zoom and it was the worst. So I'm not saying we do any of this over Zoom. This will all be in public meetings, council meetings. So it'd be a council agenda item where we sit down and talk
I
about
mean,
it.
I thought you were going to send it by a Zoom survey. That's fine for the initial.
Yeah, just for the
paring
initial
down.
to narrow it down.
Right, okay.
Great,
Right.
thank you.
So the other thing, which is, you know, I'm thinking as I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the staff over there is, you know, I guess I'm back to my plane. So where do you want to go, when you get there, how much do you want to pay for it? Because there's a lot of really expensive stuff here.
Yes.
And it's all great, but, you know, at some point, we're narrowing down now, and I don't know how much, you know, how much work you want done or when you're gonna want done to put money into these things, because
And then some of these have, follow-up. So they're great ideas, but then what is it? I'm gonna pick on one just because, like regulating part-time rentals, that might be a good thing for housing. What's that gonna take for us to do? Like, are we gonna have people checking that? What's the ongoing effort for that? What's the cost of that effort? How many, what does that program look like? So it's a great idea, but is that really, at the end of the day, is it really get us? Is that gonna do what we want, or are we better off to just invest in getting more housing? So somehow we need to think of how we sort those up. That's just one, and there's so a lot of these is what's the ongoing effort that goes, once we've done this, what's left? What's the annual cost? So
Process wise. So, I mean, first of all, I think there might be some like
there's lots.
lumping.
Yes.
So that will
Lots
help.
Yeah.
Like, I know that the first time I did this, there were like a bunch of things thrown out. I had no idea what any of it meant. Like is there a point? And there's things that have even come up recently of like this Berlin pond conservation, where there's like this time sensitive, unique opportunity that's popped up of some land adjacent to city owned land that like, I'm just like, it would be helpful for people to understand what the proposals are, but
Right.
yeah, Berlin pond conservation, or, name. And so probably a lot of them. So did I understand that there's gonna be like a conversation?
Yeah, so let me go through some more slides here and I'll show you sort of what this all looks like.
You mean you voted last year and you didn't know?
My first year.
I think there's another thing to add, though, just before we do this quickly, is that, this, as you know, those of you beyond, this will, once we set this will guide our activity, will guide the agendas. But stuff still comes up. I mean, it kind of goes back to the what's urgent, maybe not important, but it's urgent, as we said. So, we may at some point have to have an agenda item, whether to kick in for a purchase of land. And so the only question is, how does that meet? Is that an environmental stewardship? Is that consistent with our values and our goals, or is that just something we're not interested in? So, Parkwood, we probably will have to be talking about purchasing Parkwood. So how does that fit into where we want to go? Where's the money?
Just one other, like, I feel like it's a slightly unique year in having the, little bit of city ARPA money that, so if there's things like engineering studies or things that are like one-time expenses that we could front load and like that set us up to, even if it's like 2 years down the road that we're gonna have the funding to do it or whatever, but I guess just like, how is there a lens of this unique moment of that? Plus there might be like a set of things that would be priorities if we could get state money for it, but otherwise won't be, but like, what would we need to do to be ready for that? Like, so.
Well, that would be
I
a
just-
good way to sort that too.
Yeah, so there might be some like ways we could think about different things.
Well, and so some of that would be now, and some of that would be when we actually get to the budget and we try to put all this stuff in, and we say, okay, now we have real, now we see. that-
Budget reality.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, before you do that, I have one thing that I thought of that I want to get on the list. Because people didn't go for it last time, but I'll throw it in. again.
Sneak it in, that's.
16-year-old voting for local elections. Statue of Councilor McCoy.
So,
Can I just?
Yep.
I just want to make it clear, homelessness task force has to have some recommendations coming out in the next couple of weeks here. So I didn't include a bunch of specifics on this because it would have been too late. But we will be bringing, we have to do it. It's,
So connecting all of these things together, which I think gets to sort of Warren's point, is so that y'all just established your goals, which was really helpful. So now you have 6, right? You've also come up with a lot of strategies, right? So we will be putting all of the strategies that you've put forward and staff can put forward in sort of into this matrix, right? You also came up with a lot of activities that could support those strategies. So we'll put those and what other things that staff recommends to get those strategies done. And then the things that we didn't really get into, but staff will be presenting to you is recommended action items to accomplish your initiatives that would accomplish your strategies and accomplish your goal. So what we'll probably look at next time is strategies and initiatives. We won't get down into the action because that's very in the weeds for y'all, right? So hopefully we'll be able to come to you with actions that support your initiatives and support strategies, support goals, right? So the things that I'll be asking you to sort of straw poll vote on electronically, and then we'll bring to council next time is like these 3 buckets. And so I think that's really we've changed a little bit of the next steps here together because this was a lot, which is great and amazing. So, but this is a lot to synthesize. So what we'll be doing is doing that first pass of those first 3 layers, plus that mission and vision statement to start workshopping together. And that allows for more public feedback about the things that you discussed tonight. And we'll give the public a way to see sort of those things outlined and weigh in on their prioritization as well. So I am excited. So my first goal for a first draft was October 13th. That's still a goal for a first draft. But I will try to, my new
It'll
goal
be on your next week's
is to
agenda.
put this on your next agenda.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This was very exciting and I really think this was very successful. So thanks y'all. Really
Ask
grateful.
us to talk anytime.
Like a bunch of wind up words.
Come up with a never-ending list of ideas with no money to put to them.
You know, that's not what this one is about, you
That's
know?
right. Visioning.
Visioning is the important part.
Yeah, yes, before we adjourn. And so if we're done with this.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm done. If
Yeah.
y'all are done, if you feel done, we're
Yeah.
done.
Okay, well, so without objections.
No.
Oh, just kidding. Wait, what? I'm sorry.
There is objection, that's why I said it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like spacing out there for a second. Hey, Stephen, could you stop talking? It's still distracting. Thank you. Go ahead.
Before we adjourn, because there's a question been raised about the appointment of the counselor, do we want to schedule a special meeting sometime between now and the end of September 13th, which is 10 days after. 17th?
Sure.
Okay, I thought.
Let me
Okay,
I'll double check it. 13th is Monday.
right.
Yeah,
No, it
potentially.
would be 13th. Well, it's business day, so.
Well, I was just gonna suggest,
So it's
Special-
17th if you go business day.
okay,
But anyway, yeah, as soon as possible.
I was gonna suggest a special meeting on the 13th. Yeah, let's go.
That should work for me. No, it doesn't.
Be a Zoom.
I'm not sure why you're shaking your head. Is that because we
No, I'm
should do
just,
it
I'm
then?
saying it's fine. That works for me.
Okay, I thought you were saying no.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, I was just kind of.
What time? I just made a dentist appointment.
In the evening?
Evening?
6:30?
If I'm going to Burlington and
Oh.
it's late in the day, it's 4:30, but I'll just change it.
I can't do anything on it. Monday.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
good.
Well, you only need four.
How's noon on that Monday?
That's better.
That's fine. Yeah, I had something there, but that.
Noon doesn't work. for
I
me.
can
You
move it
don't
around.
necessarily
Okay,
need me
okay.
For this.
What's that?
Noon doesn't work for me, but you don't necessarily need me for this.
On the 13th,
On the 13th.
I'm available.
You're available and we can,
Works for me.
you've got
Lauren,
legal
is that-
opinion, so.
I mean, we have the.
Is there another? What's the latest we can do it?
I think, Jack, to err on the side of caution, the 13th would be.
The latest we can do it.
Would one,
Yes, that's
No.
what we're talking about. the 13th.
so Lauren, you couldn't make it? Is there a better time?
Yeah, I could do 9 AM also, or 8 AM. Oh, you're at school.
Yeah, actually, I could do. Yeah, Monday. It's a little weird. I could actually do like 8 AM or 8:30.
Yeah.
AM on the 13th.
8:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
How's that for you, Connor?
Yep.
What did we
8:30 and a
decide?
Zoom meeting?
Is it 8 or 8:30? Or do we
Either
care?
one is fine.
I don't, either one.
We have something at
8:30.
9.
8:30. 8:30.
Please.
Okay.
Get the kids to school.
Exactly.
There you go.
And,
Okay.
And there will have to be a physical presence.
Yeah,
I
we'll-
will
we'll
be-
do
will
that
be
here. We'll do here.
Okay. But we'll otherwise
Be
be here. Well, it'll be otherwise a Zoom. meeting.
Well, you could come here if you'd like,
Yeah, okay.
but it will otherwise be Zoom.
There'll be a Zoom available. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So
And
what
we
are
have something
people
at
doing?
big at 9, so
Oh,
most people
but shouldn't
Zooming?
take more than half an hour.
I will be Zooming. I have to be at school.
I would probably come, but if I'm the only council member who's coming, I'm.
Yeah, me either. I mean, that's why it helps to know if people. find Zoom. Zoom.
8:30 a.m.
Monday,
Zoom and in person.
Yep.
And
Okay.
one agenda item to address the issue.
That's. I was thinking that. I was like, okay, we gotta. Okay, so we're clear 8:30. 13. Any other business before we're done? Okay,
Thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, this was fun.
okay, yeah.
Now without objection.
Now without objection, we will sit and adjourn.
At 9:59.
I told you 10 o'clock. I told you.